When 13 opened his eyes, the first thing he saw was Sherry looking down on him. At first, he was confused as to why the young lady was the one that he saw the moment he opened his eyes. However, it didn't take long for him to realize that he was actually lying on her lap. He couldn't remember how he found himself in such a place since he was sure he slept at the corner of the wagon, letting Erica and Sherry sleep together. "You were crying in your sleep," Sherry said softly as she gently used her finger to wipe the tear stains on 13's face. "But I felt like waking you up was a bad choice, so I decided to let you sleep on my lap, thinking that maybe it would make you feel better." "I see," 13 replied. A second later, Erica also wiped the other side of his face with a handkerchief, looking a bit worried. "What kind of dream did you have?" Erica asked. "Although you weren't saying anything, you looked very sad in your sleep." I dreamed about a very dear friend of mine," 13 replied, still feeling the sadness of that last scene that was imprinted in his mind. "Are you talking about Christopher?" Erica asked. "Or that sleazy guy named Colbert? Shauna told me you have two subordinates. She likes Christopher because he's hardworking. As for Colbert, he apparently seems like a sly fox, so she doesn't like him much." 13 smiled faintly because Shawnee's description of his left and right-hand men were on point. "It's not them," 13 replied. "It's someone else." "Now, I'm curious," Erica narrowed her eyes. "This is the first time I see you cry. That person must be really important to you for you to cry like that. But it's a sad dream, right?" "Yes," 13 replied as he closed his eyes in order to regain his composure. He knew that they would be entering the portal soon, so he needed to return to his normal self to prevent others from being worried. Perhaps Erica and Sherry knew what Zion was about to do, which made him look endearing in their eyes, especially since they saw an extremely rare case where they saw his vulnerability. For them, the teenage boy was someone who could do almost anything. Although he wasn't perfect, being with him made them feel like everything was going to be all right. There were times when he seemed too good to be true because he didn't show any weakness to anyone. Whether he was facing strong monsters or the members of the monarch and prestigious families, he was always the one who had the initiative. So seeing a side he hadn't shown to others made him look more human in their eyes. A few minutes later, the young man finally regained his composure. He thanked the two girls, who had just finished touching him up so that there would be no tear stains visible on his face. "Let's have breakfast," 13 said. "After that, we will have one last meeting before we enter the portal." Erica and Sherry both nodded in understanding and followed 13 out of the wagon. The other wanderers were already busy cooking their meals and making their last-minute preparations to enter the portal. Some were sharpening their weapons, others were meditating, while the rest were doing a bit of exercise. Drazit, who was waiting for 13 to wake up, gave the teenage boy a brief nod, which the latter returned with a smile. An hour later, 13 stood in front of the wanderers and scanned their faces. "David and his team will first enter the portal, as per our agreement," 13 said. "They will be accompanied by Lord Drazit, and they will hold the perimeter on the other side of the teleportation portal. 2 minutes later, Team 2 will follow suit. Every team will enter the portal within a 2-minute grace period. This will allow everyone on the other side to get into position to welcome the new arrivals. My team will be the last to enter to ensure that everyone will not be left behind. Now, before the first team starts to enter, do any of you have questions?" 13 waited for a full minute, but no one spoke up. All of them knew that discussions could be continued once everyone had safely entered the portal. Seeing that no one wanted to ask any questions, the teenage boy gave David a brief nod. "Team 1, get ready to enter," 13 ordered. "See you all on the other side." "Yes." David and his team, which consisted of 20 people and Drazit, lined up in front of the portal properly. One by one, they entered the portal and disappeared with a flash of light. 2 minutes later, the second team entered the portal with a determined look on their faces. When all the teams had entered the portal, 13 faced the lizard men who had accompanied them on the journey and gave them a deep bow. "Thank you for everything," 13 said. "If fate wills it, Drazit will return to share his story based on what he saw on the other side of the portal." The lizard men bid the teenage boy well wishes and told him that he would be welcomed as their special guest if he were to return to their tribe. Just as he was about to enter the portal, Erica held his left hand while Sherry held onto his right. "I don't know if we will get separated on the other side or not," Erica said. "But it might be better if we went hand in hand together." "I agree," Sherry commented. "Okay," 13 replied and held the hands of the two girls firmly before all three of them took a step into the unknown. When the teenage boy regained his vision, he found himself right at the center of a defensive formation of wanderers, which made him frown. This was the formation they practiced beforehand if they were to happen to encounter a threat on the other side of the portal that couldn't be handled by a single team. Erica and Sherry, who were still holding hands with him, scanned the surroundings and understood what was happening. The wanderers, who numbered over 600, were in some kind of closed-off area. High walls surrounded them, and on top of those walls, humans and demi-humans who were holding bows and crossbows aimed in their direction, flanking them from all sides. Some of the humans were in their late teens, and a single glance was enough to tell 13 that all of them were wanderers just like him. The wanderers from Zion's group found themselves surrounded from all sides as soon as they crossed the portal. But since they had anticipated this possibility, they were able to promptly take defensive measures, securing the area for the rest of the wanderers about to cross over to their side. Fortunately, those who stood on the walls didn't let loose their bolts and arrows right away and simply aimed them in their direction. As the minutes passed by, more wanderers exited the portal and joined the others in their formation. They had also summoned their avatars, who used their bodies to shield their masters just in case the people who had surrounded them decided to attack. When it was 13's turn to come out of the portal, the young man scanned his surroundings first in order to better assess their current situation. Humans, ratkins, lizardkin, and goblins, 13 thought as he looked at the creatures who were prepared to attack them from the high ground. Since they had not released a single arrow or bolt from their crossbows, the teenage boy understood that there might still be room for discussion. As if waiting for that moment, all the wanderers heard a ringing sound in their head, informing them of their next mission. Trial of Courage, Part 2. This is the second mission of your chain quest. The king of the Northern Kingdom is planning something sinister. He plans to use every means possible to subjugate all the races in the fractured heaven and make them obedient to him. Your mission is to stop the summoning ceremony that will take place within 30 days. If you fail to stop the ceremony, a monster never seen before in Solterra will appear. It is strong enough to eliminate all living things inside the fractured heaven, leaving nothing behind. The king of the North wishes to control it, and if he were to succeed, not only would fractured heaven fall, but the entirety of absolute heaven would also follow suit. If you wish to complete your third mission, make sure to prevent the summoning ceremony at all costs. 13 was already expecting that the second mission would be difficult, so he wasn't too shocked after reading the contents of the mission. The other wanderers around him looked anxious, but he knew that this wasn't the immediate concern that they should be dealing with at the moment. "Stay here," 13 ordered Erica and Sherry before walking toward the very front of their formation. "I'll talk to them first." The wanderers parted to let him pass, but they still raised their guard just in case the other side decided that it was time to attack. "My name is Zion Leventis," 13 shouted. "I am the leader of these wanderers. Let me talk to your leader." 13 decided to use the term wanderers instead of humans, directly letting the other side know their affiliation. Since wanderers on the other side could tell that they were still young, they should be able to tell that they were wanderers who had just started their first wandering. "How old are you?" a teenage boy, who seemed to be in his late teens, shouted back. 13 years old. 13 replied. "Is this your first wandering?" "No, but the majority here are first-timers." "Are you really Zion Leventis?" the teenage boy who asked earlier inquired. "Do you know Shoshal Leventis?" "She's my sister." 13 answered. "If you don't want to die, introduce me to your sister," the teenage boy ordered. Instead of answering, 13 raised his middle finger at the bastard who dared to even dream of meeting his sister. The wanderers who were on Zion's side immediately turned pale, not expecting their leader to do something that might provoke the other side. However, instead of getting angry, the teenage boy only laughed and lowered the crossbow in his hand. "You are indeed Shasha's brother," the teenage boy said with a smile. "She told me that you are very overprotective, and if someone were to try to date her, They would have to walk over your dead body first. Damn right, 13 replied. You won't be able to date my sister if you don't get past me first. The teenage boy laughed a second time before raising his hand to tell his comrades to lower their weapons. We are going to lower a rope, so you can climb. But only you are allowed to leave, the teenage boy stated. You and our leader will have to talk first before we allow the rest of your subordinates to enter our stronghold. But I have to admit, I didn't expect to see so many first-timers in one place. I don't know if your arrival is a blessing or curse. Don't worry about the safety of your people. As long as they don't do anything stupid, no one will get hurt. 13 nodded before turning around to glance at Erica and Drazit. You guys make sure that no one here provokes the other party, 13 said in a serious tone. The sorceress and the lizard man nodded their heads and assured him that they would keep watch over the others. Just like he promised, the teenage boy lowered a rope with a knot where 13 could place his foot, allowing them to lift him up. Rocky, stay with Erica and the others, 13 ordered. I have Tiona with me, so I'll be fine. After hearing the Magma Balboa's agreement, he allowed himself to be pulled up by a lizard man who stood beside the teenage boy he was talking to a while ago. Once 13 was safely over the wall, the teenage boy introduced himself as Jaden. I'm the third in command here in the Randall Stronghold, Jaden said. Since you are a wanderer, can you tell me what your mission is? 13 nodded. Currently, we are doing a chain quest. We just finished the first one, and the second one wants us to stop a summoning ceremony from taking place within 30 days. Jaden's face paled a bit before nodding. Although different, your mission is connected to our mission, Jaden replied. I'll tell it to you on the way to meet our leader. Is your leader also a wanderer? 13 inquired. Since there are many races inside the Randall Stronghold, he was wondering if the one calling the shots was human or not. Yes, he is human. Jaden grinned. And perhaps you know him as well. Is he famous? 13 asked, feeling curious about who Jaden was talking about. Very famous, Jaden answered, but I won't give spoilers on who he is. It will be best if you meet him yourself. 13 nodded and allowed himself to be led to one of the rooms inside the stronghold. They then stopped at a door with the ornate design of what seemed to be a dragon soaring toward the sky. So, just like you mentioned, a group of wanderers appeared on the portal today, Jaden said as he knocked on the door. I brought their leader with me as per your instruction. Come in. 13 frowned, finding the voice he heard familiar. The moment he entered the room and saw the person looking back at him with a solemn expression on their face, he instantly knew that Jaden had lied to him. You don't know how relieved I am to see you, Zion. Well, seeing a familiar face is always a good thing. Jaden deliberately kept his words ambiguous to make 13 think that their leader was a man. He simply played a trick on him because he wanted to see the other party's reaction. Seated across 13 was a young lady with long black hair and blue eyes. She wasn't wearing her usual armor and was instead wearing a simple white dress. But the simplicity of the dress brought out her natural beauty, especially the curves of her body. I'm sure Erica would be happy if she knew that you're here, 13 said with a smile. Erica's here. The young lady's smile widened after hearing that someone she was close to was also inside the stronghold. Yes, she's with the other wanderers beside the portal. But before we go and meet her, can you tell me more about the mission that you received? 13 asked. Jaden said that our mission and your mission are different, but it's still connected with each other. The young lady whom 13 was talking to was none other than Diana, the crusader of the hero party. When she first appeared here, she wrestled the top 1 position through a duel. Ever since she won, she was the one calling the shots inside the stronghold. The mission that I and the other wanderers got is called Entering the Lion's Den, Diana replied. It's part of a chain quest. Our first mission is to defend this stronghold for 30 days. The funny thing is that the reward for this mission is that we will get some reinforcements to help us infiltrate the northern kingdom ruled by the ambitious king. I just didn't expect that the reinforcements that we will get will include you and Erica. Now I feel that we stand a higher chance in clearing this mission. 13 smiled faintly and inquired more about the first mission that Diana and the other wanderers inside the stronghold had received. According to her, the Randall stronghold possessed a power source that the King of the North wished to take. To realize his want, He had sent an army of monsters to storm the stronghold and eliminate those who stood in his way. For 30 days, Diana, the Wanderers, and the other races who had fled inside the stronghold fought with everything they had. They suffered many casualties, including dozens of Wanderers who would no longer be able to return to Pangea. When Diana mentioned this part, she was visibly very sad. She even mentioned that there were times when she thought that she would be overwhelmed by their enemies and perish alongside the other defenders. This was why she was truly happy to see Zion, who had taught her a lot. The pressure was getting heavier, and she was grasping for straws on what to do next. "Good job on surviving," Diana, 13, said. "Don't worry. I'll do my best to ensure that you and the other Wanderers are able to go back safely." "Thank you, Zion," Diana replied. "Now, let's go and see your subordinates." "How many are they?" 600, 13 answered in a heartbeat. "Excuse me." "Just see for yourself, Diana. You'll understand when you see them." Diana didn't doubt the teenage boy's words. She was just surprised because of the number of reinforcements that had arrived in the stronghold. Similar to the other veteran Wanderers, she understood that the more Wanderers there were, the more difficult the mission was. So when she heard that their reward was over 600 reinforcements, instead of being happy, she started to feel anxious instead. "I know what you're thinking," 13 said before standing up. "But you shouldn't be pessimistic. You and Eric are strong. I'm sure that we can work something out if everyone works together." Diana raised her hands to lightly massage her cheeks as if trying to regain her composure. Seeing this side of her that he didn't see before, 13 was unable to hold back a smile. The Crusader acted like a cool tomboy most of the time. Perhaps she subconsciously thought that Zion wasn't a stranger, so she didn't mind showing him something that would have made Erica and the members of the hero party look at her in surprise. "Let's go," Diana said after a few seconds. "By the way, since you are the leader of this batch of Wanderers, how about you become our commander? I'll just serve as the vice commander and help you manage the rest." The young man pondered for a bit before nodding in understanding. "Okay, but there might be some resistance on your side," 13 replied. Diana smirked. "Then just ask them to challenge you to a duel. If they win, they become the commander. Easy, right?" As someone who had been trained by Zion, she was confident that there was no one inside the Randall stronghold who could beat the teenage boy in a one-on-one duel. A few minutes later, the Wanderers, who were waiting for 13, finally sighed in relief when he returned alongside the beautiful lady who looked very familiar to them. "Diana!" Erica shouted and waved her hand. "What are you doing here?" "What else?" Diana replied as she waved at her friend, who was standing beside the portal. "I was sent here, of course." When the Wanderers, who numbered over 600, realized that the Crusader of the hero party was actually the leader whom Jaden had mentioned earlier, all of them felt as if they were meeting celebrities left and right. Meeting Zion Leventis and Erica on their mission was already enough to give them bragging rights for when they returned to Pangea. Now that they met Diana, the entertainment level of their story was raised another notch. After confirming that the Wanderers who came from the one-way portal weren't hostile, a gate was opened, which allowed 13 subordinates to enter the inner levels of the Randall stronghold. Diana and those under her knew that they would be receiving reinforcements. But there was always a chance that those reinforcements might be hostile, so they decided to create a defensive formation around the portal just in case their reinforcements weren't friendly. This was why when the first batch of Wanderers appeared, Jaden didn't order his comrades to shoot them with bolts and arrows. Their original plan was to force the Wanderers to accept them as their leaders and have them join their organization. However, even they didn't expect that they would get over 600 reinforcements. They were expecting that at most, they would only get a few dozen. The saving grace was that 13 and Diana knew each other, making the merge easier. When Diana announced that Zion would become the leader of their combined forces, some of those who were under her command, including the lizard men, ratkins, and goblins, were dissatisfied with her decision. Of course, there were also other Wanderers who believed that they had better qualifications to become the leader of the new organization instead of Zion Leventis. In order to prove that he was worthy, Diana announced that anyone who wished to challenge his position could ask him for a duel. Many people, including the lizard men, ratkin, and goblins, stood up to rise to the challenge. Even Elyon decided to face the young man, who was getting all the spotlight as of late. But instead of a one-on-one duel, 13 announced a proposition that made everyone in the Stronghold think he was overestimating himself. "All of you who wish to take my position, come at me all at once," 13 said. "Fighting you one-on-one will take time. It will be much better if I just fight all of you together." Elyon and the other challengers decided to accept 13's condition. "You've eaten more than you can chew, Zion Leventis." Elyon sneered. "Time for you to understand that you're not as good as you think you are." What Elyon didn't know was that 13 had already decided to become the leader of the merger because that would make things easier for him. Also, he would be able to limit the casualties that way. Unfortunately, there were some who had selfish desires, including Elyon. Because of this, he decided to give them a good beating so that they would understand that he was someone whom they shouldn't underestimate no matter what. The lizard men gathered around Drazit and asked him if he planned to join the challenge to fight against the human boy. "If you fight him, the possibility of becoming the commander of this group is yours for the taking, Lord Drazit," one of the lizard men said. "Why don't you give it a try?" "I'll pass," Drazit replied in a heartbeat. "Zion has done a great service to our tribe and has become a hero in the eyes of the lizard men back home. I cannot bear to lay my hand on the brave warrior who had stopped the war between the rat men and the lizard men." "You're too generous, Lord Drazit," another lizard man commented. "You are truly a righteous lizard man commander." "Ha ha ha." Drazit laughed, but deep inside, he was cursing the other lizard men for trying to get him killed. He knew that although he might be able to win against the human boy in a duel, his monster army would definitely not stand by and do nothing. Aside from Rocky, who was a rank 7 sovereign, Giga, Blackie, and Hercules were all rank 6 sovereigns. But that wasn't all. 13 also had 2 ogres, who were both rank 5 sovereigns, and a troll warlord who had the same rank. The rest of the monsters under his command were only rank 4 alpha monsters, but although they were weaker than Drazit, it was impossible for the lizard man to defend himself from an elite monster army that could easily bring down the entire tribe if they wished for it. The lizard men commander sighed before glancing at his kin, who had been away from their own tribes for many years. They were the members of the tribes who had been sent to investigate what lay on the other side of the portal. They couldn't come back and had been living inside the Randall Stronghold since then. Of course, there were some of them who lived too long within this territory that they had lost all hope of going back home. The reason? Because there was only one way to return home, and that was to enter another one-way portal, which was currently within the human kingdom in the north. The first one-way portal was located in the west, leading to the Randall Stronghold. The second one-way portal was in the human kingdom, which led to the territory of the goblins in the east. This was also the reason why the goblins wished to conquer the territory of the lizard men. Once they do, they would have control over both portals, giving the humans and the goblins the ability to travel back and forth from their domains. The northern land was separated from the rest of fractured heaven by a river that cannot be crossed due to an unexplainable phenomenon. The lizard men had once tried to cross it, but after swimming only a few meters away from the riverbed, they would lose consciousness and sink to the bottom of the river. Although it was called a river, it was nearly 200 meters wide and had become an insurmountable natural barrier for the other races who lived in the fractured heaven. The only way to reach the human kingdom was by using the one-way portal. In turn, the humans could also only travel to the other side of the river using their own one-way portal. 13 had learned this information from the goblin shaman who survived from the wrath of the ratmen commanders whom they had treated as slaves for the past few weeks. "The goblins and the rat men are participating in this duel," one of the lizard men said. "Of course, some of the humans are going to join too. But is that Zion boy sane in the head? He said that he wants to fight them all at the same time." "Let's just wait and see how the match will unfold," Drazit replied. Since many were angered by his declaration, more people decided to join the battle. Seeing the number of challengers had sharply increased, Diana decided to intervene and told everyone that the duel would be delayed for an hour. The arena would be the place where the one-way portal was located, which would prevent 13 from escaping the pursuit of the challengers. The ramparts were now filled with people, and the challengers were already inside the closed-off enclosure, where the wanderers had arrived earlier. Among the challengers was none other than Elyon, who couldn't contain the sneer on his face. 30 challengers, Elyon thought. Among them are apostles like David. So, 10 humans, 10 lizard men, 5 goblins, and 5 rat men. This is going to be fun. I hope they accidentally kill Zion later. Of course, he also planned to deal a decisive blow to the teenage boy who had become an eyesore for him. You're even arrogant enough to allow weapons and avatars for this duel. Elyon laughed internally. This will be over really quick. All the challengers had agreed that all of them would target Zion first, then fight among themselves afterward. They didn't really consider this as much of a challenge. After all, their opponent was a mere rookie. Erica and Diana, who had been trained by 13, knew how capable he was. Even so, they were still a bit worried about him because the young man was going to fight Wanderers and their avatars at the same time. Of course, Tiona would also be fighting with him, but they were still worried that she might not be strong enough to protect her master, given the number of enemies they were about to face. However, despite being heavily outnumbered, 13 looked calm. In fact, he was even looking forward to the fight ahead. For him, fighting against those who wished to challenge his authority served 2 purposes. The first one was to make them understand that he was strong enough to gain their recognition. Similar to animals who lived in groups or herds, only the strongest would be able to lead them. His second reason was to treat the duel as a warm-up. Unlike the opponents they would later face, his opponents now were a mere mishmash of different races, and their teamwork was nearly non-existent. He might have been more worried if they were trained to fight in a formation together, but since they were only after their own selfish gains, he didn't have to worry at all. In fact, he believed that defeating them would be easier because there was a chance that they would fight against each other once things didn't turn out their way. Finally, after the grace period ended, 13 entered the enclosure looking very calm. Remember, this is just a duel to know who will be the new leader of our organization, Diana stated. Killing is prohibited. Do I make myself clay? Yes. 13 gave Diana a nod to inform her that they could start the battle anytime. Seeing that he was ready to fight, the Crusader raised her hand and shouted, "Duel start." As soon as the signal was given, the lizard men, rat men, and goblins charged at 13, surrounding him from all sides. The humans stayed farther at the back, preparing for the time that Zion was defeated by the monsters. The moment he was defeated, the Wanderers would then attack the monsters and neutralize them. After that, they would fight among themselves to decide who would be the commander of the Allied forces. But when the monsters were only a few meters away from 13, the young man smiled faintly and took a step forward. Erica and Diana were quite familiar with that expression, and both of them shuddered at the same time. The young man's devil-like grin triggered the memories of the harsh training that they had gone through, which even haunted them in their dreams. The first thing he did was trip the nearest lizard man, making it crash toward the goblins who were right behind 13. The goblins didn't hesitate to smack the lizardman's face to cast him aside before continuing their charge at the teenage boy, who had given one of the rat men a roundhouse kick, slamming it back toward the lizard men. As the monsters closed the gap, one of the goblins raised his bone club and smashed with all of its strength. 13 evaded the attack, making the bone club hit the snout of a lizard man, making the latter grunt in pain. "Bastard! Why did you hit me?" The lizard man growled in anger. "What else?" the goblin sneered. "Your ugly face was on the way." "Damn! An ugly goblin calling a lizard man ugly. That's got to hate," 13 said in a teasing tone and even laughed like a third-rate villain, further angering the lizard man who got hit just now. The humiliated lizard man roared in anger and punched the goblin that hit him, making the latter cry out in pain. "Bastard! You want to fight?" the goblin shouted. "Stop talking, you filthy, ugly monster," the lizard man replied and gave the goblin another punch which sent it flying. "You're uglier than a rat man." A moment later, a second goblin jumped on the back of the lizard man and held him in a headlock. A third goblin then started to whack the lizard man silly with his bone club, earning the hate of the other lizard men who had decided to help their comrade and teach the ugly goblins a lesson. "Did you hear that?" 13 asked as he dodged the attack of a rat man. "He said that rat men are ugly. HMPH. Do you think taunts like these will work on us?" a rat man replied. Unlike those stupid goblins and brainless lizards, we have our wits intact all the time. However, a shout reached the ratmen's ears, which made their ears twitch. Ratmen are trying to act like civilized creatures now. A voice that sounded like a lizard man spread in the surroundings. When I fought a ratman in the past, he was so scared of me that he pissed himself. It's a well-known fact that ratmen eat their own poop. Uncultured swines. All the ratmen glared at the nearest lizard man in the direction where the sound came from and screeched in anger. That wasn't me, the lizard man shouted. I know that ratmen don't eat their poop, but drink their own piss instead. A hateful war cry emerged from the ratmen, and they all lunged at the lizard man and gangbanged him without mercy. You brainless lizard, one of the ratmen shouted. I'll barbecue your tail and eat it for lunch. 13, on the other hand, chuckled internally. The lizard men hadn't been lying. 13 had the talent to do something like ventriloquism, saying something triggering with an entirely different voice, making it seem like other people were talking. He had imitated the voice of one of the lizard men near him and made him the target of the ratman. 13 didn't stop there and continued to fan the flames, making all the monsters start a royal rumble, completely forgetting that he was supposed to be their target. A great brawl between goblins, ratmen, and lizardmen ensued. The ratmen and the goblins joined arms with each other and fought against the lizardmen as if they couldn't live under the same sky. Seeing that the monsters were busy pummeling each other, 13 casually walked to where the wanderers led by David were and gave them a mischievous smack. I almost feel sorry for those monsters. Erica couldn't help but giggle. Zion is as bad as ever. Huh, it's a good thing that is not our enemy, Diana commented. Don't say something scary. Erica suddenly stopped laughing because she had envisioned what Diana had just said earlier. I don't want to fight Zion ever again. Sherry knew that her boss was strong, but she believed that if Erica and Diana were to work together, they would have a chance of beating the young man because they didn't underestimate him. Are the two of you not confident in fighting him together? Sherry asked. Sherry, you don't know what you're talking about, Diana replied. Zion may look harmless, but he is a wolf in sheep's clothing. Although we have become stronger and may have the chance of winning against him, I don't want to challenge him for the leadership of this alliance. Spars are good. Training is even better. But a duel? I'd rather fight a rank 5 sovereign alone than fight Zion in a duel. He won't hold back just because we are friends. Sherry tilted her head to the side. Is that an exaggeration? I wish. Erica pursed her lips. He trained our entire party in preparation for the winter solstice. Then and there, we realized that Zion Leventis wasn't an ordinary rookie. You'll understand, Sherry, Diana said. Just watch for now, and see with your own eyes what we're talking about. As if waiting for Diana to say those words, 13 charged toward David and the apostles, who had formed a battle formation. Unlike the lizard men, goblins, and rat men, who were now seriously smacking each other silly, the apostles had fought many battles together and had already put their teamwork to the test. Summoning his spear, David launched a spear thrust, while his comrades used their own techniques to trap 13 in a pincer attack. But the young man, who was now wielding a pair of short swords, swung his weapons around him, blocking the combined assault of the wanderers with deadly precision. Sparks flew as his arm guides, whom he also used as a shield from time to time, deflected some of these blows, allowing him to counterattack. With a well-aimed calf kick aimed at David's right leg, 13 destroyed his stance and followed up with an elbow strike that hit the side of the young man's face, making him stagger. Elyon, who took that opportunity to use his strongest attack, targeted 13's blind spot. He didn't make any sound and kept his presence as low as possible to increase the chances of success. But just as his blade was about to pierce through Zion's back, a black tail slapped his sword, deflecting it to the side. A second later, Elyon found himself face-to-face with a black snake that was always coiled around Zion's neck. Tiona opened her mouth and unleashed a petrification breath at point-blank range, covering Elyon's entire body in a gray mist. The other wanderers hurriedly backed off because they were quite familiar with this skill, which caught them completely by surprise. When the wind blew and dispersed the gray mist blocking everyone's view, all they saw was Elyon's rock statue, with a horrified look on his face. Remind me to let Jiga and Blackie piss on that statue later, Tiona, 13 said through telepathy. This brat needs to be taught a lesson. Tiona hissed in agreement as she glanced at the other opponents who encircled her master from all sides. She had been feeling bored as of late, so fighting against these people would fix that problem for the time being. Careful! That snake can petrify people with its breath, one of the apostles shouted. Don't get too close. Did you hear that, Tiona? 13 asked out loud. They said that they should not get too close to you. How about you take the initiative to get close to them instead? The black snake nodded before uncoiling herself from her master's neck. She then used the power of telekinesis to fly toward the wanderers, making them scream like little girls, as she once again unleashed a petrification breath, which had a very low chance of petrifying anyone that was 2 levels above her current rank. While Tiona took over dealing with the small fries, 13 faced the wanderers, who had now summoned their avatars. Rank 3 monsters appeared in front of him, with a few rank 4 monsters as well, but he didn't think much of them. Officially, he might be a rookie, but his current strength was that of a master. With his ability to accurately calculate the path of his enemies' attacks, he was able to dodge, deflect, and block them if need be. David, who was seeing 13 fight for the first time, was thinking the same thing as everyone else was thinking. Is he really just a rookie? Even the other wanderers spectating this scene couldn't help but think along those lines. This was the first time that they were seeing the Supreme Commander of the Alliance in action, and frankly, the scene in front of them had gone beyond their expectation. Without any wasted movements, 13 calmly dealt with the apostles in a systematic manner. Summoning throwing weapons in his hands, he unhesitatingly and mercilessly threw them at the locations that would make his opponents feel a world of pain. However, the young man wasn't their only problem. Tiona would use her levitation to throw Elyon's stone statue as a projectile at anyone who was trying to launch a sneak attack on her master's back. Since she and 13 had synchronized their senses together, it was as if having another pair of eyes looking at his surroundings. One by one, the challengers fell, until it was only David with his 3 avatars, guarding him from the front and his sides. A lion, a tiger, and a bear, 13 said with a smirk. That's quite a lineup you have there. All of them are rank 4 monsters. Either you are lucky, or your family is rich. I'm both, David said. But compared to the Leventis family, I'm just a frog in the well. So, you still want to continue? 13 asked in a casual manner. Giving up is only something I will do when I have tried everything in my power and failed to achieve the results that I am aiming for, David replied. 13 nodded. A good mindset. But it's time to end this. Without even giving David a chance to reply, 13 threw something that looked like a black bomb at the apostle, making the bear, who was standing in front of David, swat it away. However, as soon as the monster's claws and the bomb clashed with each other, the bomb exploded, releasing a black powdery mist that made the bear avatar cry out in pain. David, his lion, and his tiger hurriedly backed off in caution since they didn't know what just happened. But it didn't take long for them to understand what 13 had thrown because the wind had blown in their direction, making David start coughing. Black, Calamba peppercorn. David forced himself to shout. You're mad. Oh, you know about it. 13 said in a teasing tone. Since you know what it is, you know what's going to happen next, right? David pressed his hands over his neck because he felt as if his throat was burning. Even his rank 4 lion and tiger were suffering the same symptoms, making them unable to fight. There was a plant-type monster called Black Calamba, which was a rank 5 monster. It was not an aggressive monster, but if someone were to come within its territory, it would release a black mist that was dozens of times more potent than pepper sprays. Some wanderers would gather the peppercorns that grew on the plant sacks of these monsters to sell them as ingredients to restaurants. They were as potent as they were exquisite to the taste and were one of the most sought spices in the world. In small doses, the black calamba was similar to ordinary black pepper, except it was extra spicy. But in large doses, they could pose a serious threat even to monsters. It could cause temporary blindness and a burning sensation to those who managed to inhale it. It was similar to Jiga's stink spray. The only difference was that it didn't smell bad. Even so, It was just as deadly. I have more, you know. 13 said as he showed 2 more black bombs that he had just summoned from his dimensional storage. This time, you'll get hit by the real deal. I surrender. David no longer hesitated and shouted his surrender. Short-term exposure to the black Calamba's grounded peppercorns wasn't lethal, but continuous exposure to it would become deadly, and in a pathetic way. It would make breathing nearly impossible because the receiving end would cough non-stop until they ran out of breath. This was why the black Calamba wasn't a monster that anyone would go all out to fight, with the exception of wanderers who specialized in collecting rare and exquisite spices that fetched a high price. After dealing with the humans, 13 glanced in the direction of the monsters, who were all panting for breath after they fought against each other. Tiona was juggling several stone statues with her telekinesis, threatening to throw them at the lizard men, rat men, and goblins who were glancing in her master's direction. Still want to fight? 13 asked. No, one of the lizard men replied. I give up. The rat men and goblins also conceded, and soon, Diana declared him as the winner. Now that everyone had seen his fighting prowess, they would no longer get in his way of leading their organization. Then this is my first order, 13 said. Everyone, rest for today. I will discuss with my vice commander, Diana, the things that we will do moving forward. Since they were tight on time earlier, he wasn't able to ask her for more information about the Northern Kingdom, where their second mission was waiting for them. But before he did that, he went to the dung pile his bisons had left behind and ordered Tiona to dump Elyon's stone statue on it. The Black Snake was more than happy to obey her master's orders and even made sure that Elyon's head was dunked into the dung pile, leaving his feet sticking up into the air. The petrification breath only lasted for a few hours, so the moment Elyon was freed from it, he would find himself buried in dung. Sean and the other members of the Siny faction looked at their comrade in horror and quietly made an oath to never cross Zion while they were with him during their mission. The Sign of the Griffin clan knew that Elyon was a very ambitious individual, but he didn't do anything to him since the other party had yet to do anything that disturbed their own group. Still, he was thankful that he had decided to work together with Zion, which prevented him from getting on his bad side. Only after 13 had dealt with the bastard who had been an annoyance since the day they met did he gather the officers to brainstorm on what they would do to complete their second mission together. So, tell me everything you know about this territory, 13 said as he glanced at Diana. Don't leave anything behind. Even trivial information might be a crucial key to clear our second mission. Understood. Diana nodded and began to tell what she and her comrades had gathered while they were stuck inside the Randall Stronghold and defending against the monster tide that the Northern King had sent in their direction. This will be a bit tricky, 13 muttered as he gazed down on the countless bodies of ant-type monsters left outside the Randall Stronghold's defensive walls. The wanderers who had been sent here with Diana had all received a survival-type mission, in which they had to defend against swarms of monsters for 30 days that pushed them to their limits. There were times when they thought that they could no longer make it. But Diana, who stood at the forefront of every defensive war, perfectly served as a beacon of light, raising everyone's morale in battle. But with the current state of the fortress, it was obvious that it might not be able to endure one more attack from the monster tide that might come in 3 days. This was also why the Crusader and her comrades were desperate to get some reinforcements promised to be the reward of their mission. 13 knew that some chain quest worked this way, with multiple teams of wanderers teaming up from different missions to complete the next mission together. It just so happens that Diana was stationed inside the Randall Stronghold, and 13's team was the reinforcements that were promised to them by the mission. You did a good job surviving, Diana, 13 praised as he glanced at the young lady standing beside him. Thank you, Diana replied with a smile. Diana knew that she wouldn't have survived long enough if it weren't for the hellish training that she had undergone under 13's guidance. Also, the teenage boy rarely gave anyone praise, so she felt genuinely happy hearing him praise her for doing her best to survive. The artifacts that he had given her saved her life during this mission, which she was very thankful for. So they attack this fortress every 4 days, right? 13 asked, and they come from that direction. The teenage boy pointed toward the east, where an ominous purple light could be seen shooting toward the heavens. That's right, Diana replied. I believe that's where we need to go in order to stop the king from doing whatever he is doing. 13 narrowed his eyes as he looked at the east. He had already sent Rocky and Tiona's clone to investigate the location where the monster tide was coming from. Once they reported back to him, he would then make a plan on how they could complete their joint mission together. Although we have different missions, it's basically the same thing, 13 said after a few moments of silence. Your mission is to enter the lion's den, which is the human kingdom, while our mission is to stop the summoning ceremony. Since our missions align, we can all head in the same direction and work together to complete it. However, your concern is that we might get caught up in the monster tide if we advance now, correct? Diana nodded. Many died in the most recent monster tide. Because of this, none of them will dare to go out in the open unless they are certain that it won't happen again. The Stronghold is also barely hanging on. The gate will not hold for long, and there are some insects that can easily crawl up the walls. Some of them can even fly, which makes things harder. Don't worry, now that we're here, we can work something out, 13 said. Also, there's a possibility that the monster tide you face will be the last monster tide that will come from that direction, so don't worry too much. I hope you're right. Diana sighed. A few hours later, 13 sat cross-legged on top of his bed as he and Tiona shared the senses of a clone, who was together with Rocky to investigate the source of the monster outbreak. So this is their base, 13 thought as he gazed through the eyes of Tiona's clone, assessing the situation. Countless monster eggs the size of a refrigerator filled up a vast, spacious cavern. Just a glance was enough to tell him that the monsters that would hatch from these eggs would become their enemies in 3 days. That must be the Ant Queen, 13 mused as he gazed at the biggest red ant at the center of the cavern, protected by dozens of worker ants, who were busy sorting out the eggs that she was laying en masse. An evil smile appeared on 13's face as he thought of a way how to use this to his advantage. Rocky, take as many eggs as you can and put them inside your mobile fortress, 13 ordered. Gwen, eat as much as you like and increase your rank as fast as possible, 13 commanded. Do your best to reach rank 4 within 3 days. The Overlord Beetle was a special monster that was more powerful than a brain beetle. In proportion, it needed a vast amount of resources for it to rank up. Even with 13's help, the Overlord Beetle had only managed to elevate itself into a rank 2 monster. The Leventis family wasn't aware that he had a monster that could technically mind control people. If this information was leaked, it would definitely cause an uproar. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that the central government, the Monarch clans, and the prestigious families would demand that the monster be killed in front of their eyes. Such was the terror that had been planted inside their memories after their battle against Evuvig in an attempt to liberate the Rigel continent from the Jinns many years ago. It wasn't hard to imagine how fearful they'd be if they knew that 13 had control over an even more powerful version of the monster that terrorized them. Not that 13 cared. If anything, he was more worried about how he'd feed Gwen. Fortunately, this problem in resources had just been solved by the unlimited buffet that had presented itself in front of the teenage boy, who viewed the countless ant eggs as nutrition for his Overlord Beetle. When Rocky rose up from the ground and started to devour the ant eggs, the Ant Queen, who was a rank 7 sovereign, was alarmed by its appearance. The Waker ants and soldiers' ants immediately tried to repel the invader, but it was a very difficult thing to do because their opponent could come and go as it wished. Gwen, who had been given the opportunity to feast on nutritious, defenseless ant eggs, ate happily. The stronger it became, the more creatures it could control and subjugate. Nearly 30 minutes later, Rocky had devoured a third of the ant eggs inside the cavern and fled as fast as he could. It planned to return later after Gwen had finished its meal. Once he was certain that his monsters were not in any danger, 13 finally decided to sleep and call it a night. He knew that even when he was sleeping, Rocky would continue to raid and devour the eggs from the ant nest, leaving the queen stressed out and the ants on high alert. As long as there were no ants that would hatch from the eggs, there would be no monster tide that would harass the wanderers staying inside the Randall stronghold. Truth be told, 13 was tempted to capture the Ant Queen and have it become his subordinate. But Rocky's mobile fortress had a limit, and he would have to constantly feed and care for the Ant Queen, which would take many resources for its upkeep. So 13 decided to change his plan. He would let Gwen eat as many ant eggs as possible until it became a rank 5 monster. Unfortunately, ant queens and those who were the leaders of a nest or a hive were immune to mind control, which prevented them from becoming 13's monster factory. But he had his own ways of doing things, so he wasn't too worried. For now, he would prioritize increasing the Overlord Beetle's rank, so that it would become a great asset for the teenage boy, who was now leading all the Wanderers in the second part of his mission. The next day, "So you guys have been surviving by eating ants every day?" 13 asked with a smile. "There's nothing to eat aside from them," Diana replied. "Also, they taste good when roasted." The teenage boy soon agreed that the ants did taste good after taking a few bites of the leg that was handed to him. Overall, he found their current situation way better than he initially expected. Nearly 900 individuals were currently inside the Stronghold, including the lizard men, rat men, and goblins. The bulk of their forces came from the Wanderers that 13 had gathered before entering the one-way portal. While their numbers weren't that many, it was enough to deal with most situations unless they were going to fight rank 8 monsters and above. He was considering telling them that it was about time for them to head north. But Diana and the others, who had survived the monster onslaught, still believed that the threat of the monster outbreak should be their priority. "There's a possibility that there may be more nests that I'm not aware of," 13 thought. "Very well. I'll just wait for 3 more days to see if there will be another monster outbreak." It will be easier to convince Diana and the others if they understood that they don't have to worry about monsters' outbreaks again. A few hours later, he gathered everyone in front of the fortress so that all of them could practice large-scale formations for the upcoming battles. Now that he was the commander of their forces, and Diana was the vice-commander, he decided to train the Wanderers to learn battle formations during the next 3 days. The center of the formation was none other than Diana. With the power of the 2 artifacts that 13 had given her, she would be able to boost everyone's strength and morale at the same time. The golden necklace on her neck, which she named Justice, could transform into a golden banner, which strengthened everyone within its vicinity. Her sword, which she named Defender, possessed the indestructible ability, allowing her to block attacks without worries of it being destroyed. The golden blade which manifested from her sword handle was also very sharp, allowing her to play an offensive role if need be. Erica was also located at the center of the formation, allowing her to cast powerful spells while being protected by the other Wanderers. The Siny faction were positioned right behind the Apostle team, and they would be fighting alongside Diana on the front lines. After his humiliating experience with 13, Elyon hated the teenage boy more than ever. However, he didn't dare to confront him again in the future, especially after his body was buried in a pile of dung and was pissed on by some monsters, whom he didn't see because his head was buried in the ground. Tiona's petrification breath turned people's bodies to stone. However, their consciousness would remain, meaning that they were still able to see, feel, and hear inside of it. This was also the reason why 13 chose this skill. It can be used to save people's lives as a last resort, making monsters think that the petrified humans had truly turned to stones instead of living, breathing creatures. Even now, Elyon couldn't even look at 13's face, knowing that if he did, he might feel nauseous as if he was suffering from PTSD. 13 trained them the whole day in formations. It wasn't easy, but after the first day, everyone managed to understand their roles and how they would fight together as an army. They repeated the same training on the second day, with 13 correcting the flaws in the formation and pointing out individual mistakes made by the members. On the third day, they once again trained until noon. According to Diana, the monster outbreak would start in the afternoon and end in the evening. Truth be told, 13 wasn't too worried about it because all of the ant eggs had been devoured by not only Gwen but also the monsters inside Rocky's mobile fortress, treating it as an unlimited buffet. Of course, the bigger part of the harvest was given to Gwen because it needed to reach the rank that 13 had asked it to reach. Fortunately, within those 3 days and after consuming countless ant eggs, the Overlord Beetle finally became a rank 4 monster. This increased the number of creatures it could put under its control to 10. This meant that Gwen could now mind control 10 champions and rank 5 monsters without problems. As the Wanderers took their places on the nearly ruined fortress walls, all of them gripped their weapons tightly. The monster outbreak should happen in less than an hour, so everyone prepared themselves for a grueling battle. 13, who was beside Erica, Sherry, and Diana, was sitting on a chair with his arms crossed over his chest. His eyes were closed as if he was just taking a nap. But if any signs of trouble occurred, he would instantly awaken and take command of the Wanderers, who were now starting to wonder if the monster outbreak would still happen or not. Minutes turned to hours, and even though the sun was now about to set on the horizon, not a single monster could be seen headed in their direction. Diana, who knew how horrifying the monster outbreak was feeling both relieved and confused as to why it didn't happen. I guess the monster outbreak stopped after you guys completed your first mission, 13 said as he stood up from his chair. If my guess is correct, it is now safe to travel towards that pillar of light in the distance. Since we also have a time limit for our second mission, all of us will depart tomorrow. We can't waste more time staying here in the Stronghold. Diana nodded in understanding. Very well. I will tell the others about your decision. Although she was still worried, she decided to trust 13 because he was right about their second mission having a time limit. When Diana had finally left to inform everyone that the threat of the monster outbreak was now over, Erica and Sherry approached the young man with suspicious looks on their faces. Did Rocky and the others do something? Erica asked. 13 nodded. They have been raiding an ant nest for the past few days. His explanation was enough to confirm Erica's and Sherry's guess regarding why there were no longer any monsters attacking them. Will you tell Diana about Rocky and the others? Erica inquired. She is a good friend of mine, and I believe that she can be trusted. 13 pondered a bit before nodding in agreement. True, 13 said. Since Diana is my vice commander, she needs to know about Rocky and the others so that she won't second-guess my decisions. I also think that is the best approach, Sherry commented. If she knew about their existence, she would be able to come up with an excuse later if something unexpected happened. Erica then shifted her attention to the purple light shining in the distance. It looked beautiful from afar, but for someone who could faintly sense the magic in her environment, it gave her a very ominous feeling as if something extremely bad would happen soon. Do you think we can complete this mission? Erica asked as he shifted his attention to the teenage boy, who was still looking at the light on the horizon. Of course, 13 replied. Before coming here, I asked the one to give me an easy mission. Since he agreed, then this mission should be a walk in the park. Erica and Sherry stared long and hard at the teenage boy who had been in a coma for several days after his battle with the Goblin Emperor. If that was considered a walk in the park, then they could expect that things would only get worse as they continued to clear their chain quest. 13, on the other hand, was starting to form a theory on what needed to be done in order to clear his mission. Of course, he first needed to see the human kingdom first to confirm his theory. But if his instinct were right on the money, he believed that he would need to do something drastic to overcome the situation that they were going to face. I just hope that I won't be forced to do something crazy, 13 thought. But even after he thought of that, 13 knew that if he was pushed to make a decision, he would not hesitate to do something crazy. Especially since Tiona's clone, who had scouted ahead towards the pillar of light in the distance, had just informed him that it could sense several rank 8 creatures hiding within the human kingdom. With so many high-ranking monsters, even his monster army wouldn't be able to take them down even if they fought with everything they had. A few hours after everyone had eaten their dinner, 13 asked Diana to spare some time so that the two of them could talk together. Diana agreed right away, thinking that 13 probably wanted to talk to her about their plan for when morning came. After walking for a few minutes and making sure that they were a good distance away from the Stronghold, the teenage boy turned around to face the young lady, who was looking back at him with curiosity. Why did we go this far to talk, Zion? Diana asked. Can't we have done it in your room? My room is too small to have this talk, Diana, 13 answered. But before anything else, I would like you to promise me something. Can you do that? What kind of promise? Don't worry. It's a very simple promise that anyone can do as long as their willpower is strong enough. Diana frowned as the teenage boy's serious tone made her start feeling a little anxious. Tell me, what do you want me to promise? I want you to promise me that you will not scream no matter what you see. That's it. Diana asked. I just need to promise not to scream. That's right. 13 nodded. You're not after my body, right? Diana asked in a teasing tone. I mean, you at that age, right? Huh? What are you talking about? 13 scratched his head because their discussion suddenly took an unexpected turn. Why would I be after your body? Diana chuckled. I'm just joking. Rihanna told me that you're very smart, but very dense when it comes to romantic feelings. Ah, you're talking about that. 13 finally understood what the Crusader was talking about, so he shook his head to tell her that she didn't have to worry about anything. Don't worry. Even if you strip naked in front of me, I will not be interested in your body. I see. So you're already at that age. I'm sorry if I caused a misunderstanding by inviting you to talk in private. Ooh. Diana could only stare at the young man for a few seconds, not knowing what to feel. Half of her felt relieved, and yet the other half was giving her the strong urge to give the teenage boy a good smacking. If not for the fact that she knew that she couldn't defeat him, she might have gone all out to slap him silly. Taking long and deep breaths in order to calm herself down, she finally pressed her hand over her chest. I promise to not scream no matter what I see, Diana said. Happy? Yes. 13 nodded. Well, then, let me introduce you to my friend, Rocky. As if waiting for that moment, a giant head rose behind the teenage boy, making Diana take a step back. Fortunately, she had braced herself for anything unexpected, so she was able to keep her promise of not screaming no matter what she saw. Diana gaped at the monsters that she was seeing for the first time in her life, and a glance was enough to tell her that this monster was powerful. Very powerful. It was more powerful than the three-horned Minotaur, the rank 5 monster that gave them a lot of trouble in the past. 13 was paying close attention to Diana's reaction, and he couldn't help but smile seeing that the young lady had kept her word. Suddenly, the magma Balboa opened its mouth wide, making Diana take a fighting stance. But when she saw what was inside the monster's mouth, she couldn't help but wonder if she was just seeing things. Took you guys long enough, Erica said with a smirk on her face. I've been waiting since forever. Come, Diana. There's something that you have to see no matter what. Erica jumped off from Rocky's mouth and landed a few meters away from Diana. The sorceress then grabbed the hand of her friend before dragging her toward the monster's mouth, snapping Diana from her daze. Don't worry, Diana, 13 said as he stepped inside Rocky's mouth, which was still wide open. There's nothing to be afraid of. The young man then walked inside the monster's throat, disappearing from her view. I know you're feeling anxious, but trust me, Rocky is a good boy, Erica commented as she continued to drag her friend toward Rocky's open mouth. If I die, Erica, I swear that I will haunt you for life, Diana said through gritted teeth. Sure. Erica chuckled. But that won't be happening because it's perfectly safe. When the two ladies had fully entered the magma Balboa's mouth, Rocky closed it right away before burrowing into the ground. Inside the mobile fortress. Where are we? Diana asked as she looked around her surroundings. She could see a lake in the distance, and a few monsters loitering in her surroundings doing different things. Some were sharpening their weapons, and some were playing cards with each other. To her surprise, there was another human aside from Erica, and it was none other than 13's right-hand woman, Sherry. I know you have a lot of questions, and I will answer all of them, 13 said. But just like what I asked you earlier, I want you to promise me to not speak a word about this secret of mine to anybody. Who else knows about this secret aside from Erica, Sherry, and me? Diana inquired. My family, my grandpa, my grandma, my uncle, a butler named Hans, and a few members of the Leventus elite squad, 13 answered. Aside from them, no one else knows about this secret. The Crusader then scanned her surroundings and realized that all the monsters around her were very powerful. Are they avatars? Diana asked. Are they your avatars? They're not avatars, 13 answered. They're my beast companions, just like Tiona. The black snake, who was always coiled on 13's neck, nodded her head as if to affirm her master's answer. This is crazy. Diana muttered. Now I understand how you managed to end the war between the rat men and the lizard men. You have the army that can tilt the balance in your favor. 13 nodded. That's right. And from now on, They will also help tilt the balance in our favor. So, without further delay, let me introduce you to everyone. That way, you will become familiar with them, and you can help me come up with excuses when they are discovered by those who didn't know my secret. Diana was still in the process of digesting everything that the teenage boy was telling her. While she was trying to accept her current situation, she noticed Jiga, who was happily munching on an ant egg and devouring the nearly formed ant inside of it. It was at this moment that something clicked inside of her head. A theory started to form inside her head, explaining why the monster outbreak that terrorized them every 4 days suddenly stopped. Erica and Sherry watched with amusement as Zion dragged the day's crusader and introduced her to his friends. The two of them knew that before the night was over, they would have another accomplice who would help them keep the teenage boy's secret. The secret that would help them clear their second mission using the most efficient way possible. After 13 finished introducing everyone, Diana was finally able to regain her composure. Since the introductions are over, I will tell you girls what I have discovered in our destination, 13 said in a serious tone. It seems that this mission will be more difficult than the ones we've ever faced in the past. We might have to fight a few rank 8 monsters to clear our missions. Erica and Sherry, who were both feeling amused earlier, couldn't help but look at the teenage boy in disbelief. They knew that Zion wouldn't joke about something as important as this, so they took his word seriously. Rank 8 monsters. Erica frowned. And there's more than one. She knew that it took everything Zion had to fight against the Goblin Emperor, who was a rank 8 sovereign. If they were going to face a few monsters of that rank, there was only one ending, and that would be their doom. Did the one send us here to die? Diana clenched her fists in frustration. How can we possibly win against those kinds of monsters? Calm down, 13 said. We're still not sure about the general situation. I just mentioned that there are a few rank 8 monsters where the Pillar of Light was at. Until we assess the current situation, we won't launch an attack on the human kingdom. It will just be suicide on our part if we even try. Besides, there's also a possibility that these rank 8 monsters and the human kingdom are not allies. Maybe they're just using each other for mutual benefit. Erica and Sherry both nodded in agreement. First, a monster outbreak. Now, we have to face off against rank 8 monsters, Diana muttered. I think we don't have enough lives to complete this mission. 13 chuckled because she could understand Diana's dilemma. Even so, he believed that there was a way to solve this problem. If there was really no solution to be found within Fractured Heaven, then 13 would have no choice but to look for solutions elsewhere. He understood that the one and the Laplace demon were using him as some kind of software to fix the bug in the world of Solterra that both of them had given up on. In return, they would give him favors and accept some of 13's requests as compensation for his troubles. But while everyone was feeling anxious about what was waiting for them where the Pillar of Light was being emitted, 13 was feeling quite excited. Since Metatron had allowed him to capture subordinates that were rank 8 monsters and above, he planned to use this opportunity to grab 1 or 2 of them, allowing his own faction within the Order of Apocalypse to slowly catch up to his peers. Leaving the Randall Stronghold was rather easy, since the wooden wagons had crossed the one-way portal alongside 13's group. Traveling in a group was possible. Nearly all the wanderers who were with Diana also had avatars of their own, so they had something to mount on. As for the goblins, lizard men, and rat men, they also had their own mounts, which they acquired by hunting when they first arrived at the Stronghold. Diana's former comrades were still wary about the monster outbreak, but after she repeatedly told them that there was nothing to worry about, they reluctantly agreed to head to their next destination. It wasn't really that hard to convince them. Their second mission had a time limit, and it only had to be brought up. So whether they liked it or not, they had no choice but to leave the Stronghold. Even without directly bringing it up, they also knew that if they stayed behind any longer, they might fail their mission. With nearly 900 individuals traveling together, they were a force to reckon with. 13 had sent the members of his 100 demons to scout ahead, making sure that they wouldn't be taken by surprise by any powerful monsters in the vicinity. After 4 days of traveling, they arrived at the foot of a mountain, which they needed to traverse in order to reach their destination. But before that, 13 gathered everyone for a strategy meeting. This mountain is home to steel Falcons, which are all rank 3 monsters and above, 13 said. Their numbers are over 200, and they will be a pain to deal with because they can attack from a distance using feathers that are as hard as steel. Our strategy will depend on the situation, but it's highly likely that we'd clash with them. All of them are very aggressive monsters, so once we fight even against a single individual, the entire group will descend on us like mob monsters. Each falcon had a wingspan of 5 meters, and they were very fast, agile monsters, capable of performing aerial maneuvers that could easily dodge most range attacks from a distance. They could also charge at their opponent, using their steel wings and talons like swords to cut their opponent's flesh. Although these steel falcons have high physical defense, they are very weak to magic, Erica commented. I can easily deal with them, so you don't have to worry about anything, Zion. 13 nodded. I know that you can easily deal with them, but that isn't the problem. If possible, when you kill them, don't burn them completely. Our goal is to kill them with their bodies intact. Their feathers can be used as throwing knives, which will be useful in any situation. Their beaks and claws are also something that blacksmiths can use to craft weapons. To put it simply, they are very valuable materials, so we shouldn't waste any of them. Last but not the least, if possible, the apostles must help the first-timers land the last hit on the monsters. I know that crippling them is harder than killing them, but if the others can gain items, weapons, or avatars from them, we will be killing 3 birds with 1 stone. The apostles nodded in understanding because this was truly a way to maximize the value of the rank 3 monsters. Although there was a chance that they could gain items by killing them, those chances were not very high because these monsters were slightly weaker than apostles. The wanderers who had come with Zion were quite happy to hear that they might be able to gain items from rank 3 monsters with the help of their seniors. For them, this was a very good deal and also a very rare opportunity. At first, they climbed the mountains, thinking that the steel falcons would attack them indiscriminately. But they were wrong. Some of these falcons weren't mindless monsters and were deterred by their presence. Only a dozen or so, who thought that they could overpower their enemies, decided to attack them, which led to their deaths. Using her magic bullets, Erica shot these aggressive birds from the sky, making them the prey of the wanderers who were waiting for them in the ground. Everything was going smoothly until night came. The steel falcons who didn't attack them during the day launched an all-out attack during the night. Led by a rank 5 alpha falcon, they used the cover of darkness to attack the wanderers, thinking that they would be easily dealt with. But they were wrong. 13 already knew what they were planning to do because his scouts were paying close attention to their movements. Because of this, he asked the wanderers to stay inside the caves that they discovered, while the apostle and the other rank 4 monsters and above like Drazit faced off against the monster army. Using the trees and terrain as cover, they used hit-and-run tactics against their foes. Originally, 13, the apostles, and the monsters accompanying him shouldn't have won easily. After all, they were greatly disadvantaged by the number of their enemies. But Gwen made a humongous difference. The Overlord Beetle controlled the mind of the rank 5 Alpha Falcon, as well as the 9 strongest Steel Falcons in the group. Since the Alpha Monster was the leader of the monsters, Gwen made it issue commands that made 13 and the others have an easier time subjugating them. By the time the other Steel Falcons realized what was happening, it was already too late. The Alpha Monster and the 9 other Steel Falcons that were under Gwen's control backstabbed their comrades, making them all lose the ability to resist. The battle lasted for an hour before over 100 Steel Falcons lay dying on the ground, waiting for the Wanderers to kill them off one by one. Sherry, who had accompanied 13, was able to kill one rank 4 monster with the help of her Blade Panther. The item she received from killing it was a pitch-black short sword that was extremely sharp. The other Wanderers were a bit lucky because a handful of them managed to get rank 3 Steel Falcon avatars, while the rest got items and weapons like Sherry. As for the rank 5 Alpha Monster and the 9 other Falcons that were now under Gwen's control, they were taken inside Rocky's mobile fortress, where 13 would decide what to do with them. 13 was tempted to have the rank 5 Alpha Falcon get killed by Erica or Sherry, but he decided that it would be a waste to kill it like that when he could use it as a flying mount. It was just that the Falcons they captured were too proud and too stubborn to yield and submit to them. They would rather die than serve someone like Zion. This was especially true for the rank 5 Alpha Monster, who didn't hesitate to fight even the strong monsters inside the mobile fortress, despite being at a great disadvantage. In the end, 13 made a hard decision and allowed Diana to kill the alpha monster, which gave her an item. This item was none other than a pair of steel falcon wings, allowing the Crusader to fly, making Erica and Sherry feel envious of her. Fortunately, the two settled down after they were allowed to kill the rest of the Falcons, which made them acquire rank 4 avatars that they could use as flying mounts if need be. 3 days later, the Wanderers looked in the distance, where the pillar of light was shining towards the heavens. Although they were still far away, they could now see a glimpse of a city that was surrounded by a purple barrier. 13 frowned as he gazed at this scene. According to Rocky and Tiona's clone, the purple barrier extended even under the ground, preventing anyone from entering the city using normal methods. What should we do? Diana asked. 13 pondered a bit before giving his opinion. Let's form a small elite team to investigate if we can break the barrier, 13 said. The others will need to hide for the time being until we finish our investigation. Erica nodded in agreement because this was indeed a good strategy. 13 had already warned her that the enemy had multiple rank 8 monsters inside the city, so they should be extra careful with their approach. Since the other Wanderers wouldn't survive against an encounter with such powerful monsters, they could only find a hiding place for a while until 13's team was done assessing their current situation. The kingdom of Ceneros had been enduring ever since the fractured heaven was separated from the absolute heaven. For hundreds of years, they had endured and even prospered to become the most powerful race in the land. Many wise, powerful kings had paved the way for this to happen. Unfortunately, even the wisest of these kings couldn't fight time and had died of old age. The current king was a very ambitious leader. After becoming a monarch, he decided to unite the entirety of the fractured heaven under his rule. From the valleys of the goblins, the undercities of the rat men, and the wetlands of the lizard men, he wanted to rule them all. But that wasn't his end goal. His end goal was to force all the races to come under his banner so that he could have a force capable of overcoming the monsters that lived on the other side of the wall. By doing so, the fractured heaven would reunite with the absolute heavens, ending their isolation from the rest of the world. Unfortunately, he decided to use foul, notorious means to get what he wanted. He didn't really care whether the other races would perish or not. In his point of view, they were just tools he could use to reach his goal. However, despite the opposition of the Council of Elders, he truly had the means to make his dreams happen. And the reason why he was able to do it? It was because he had discovered the ancient and lost technology of the true absolutes. Thousands of years ago, there was a race that lived in the continent where they resided from, and these people were called the true absolutes. It was for this reason that the lands they lived in were called the absolute heaven. This race of people was not only superhuman in strength but also held knowledge and technology that was more advanced than their peers. They mingled with the local humans and gave birth to superhuman children who inherited not only their characteristics but also those of the humans. Unfortunately, when the first jinns arrived in Solterra, their gate opened inside the absolute heaven, which resulted in the near extinction of this race. In a final attempt to preserve their legacy, the absolutes created the absolute wall, separating fractured heaven from the rest of the world. Nothing could get inside of it, and nothing could get out of it. Only the Wanderers, who could travel anywhere in Solterra, could descend upon these lands from the outside. The children of the absolutes and humans looked exactly like humans, but they were a far superior race. The only downside was that they couldn't reproduce as fast as humans, and at most, their women could only give birth to a child or two in their lifetime. A hybrid absolute could live up to 200 years even if they didn't increase their rank. But to those who could increase their realm, they could live up to hundreds of years, even up to 1,000 without any problems. And now, the current king of the absolutes, King Zanmara, who was the most ambitious among the hybrids, decided that now was the time to rise up and destroy the status quo. Unfortunately, his plans to subjugate the rat men with the help of the goblins failed. This, in time, stopped the war between the rat men and the lizard men, which had reached a turning point. But that didn't deter him from continuing his plans. How long before the summoning is completed? King Zanmara asked his advisor. Less than a month, Your Majesty, the advisor replied. I want a specific date, not an estimate. It is hard to give a precise estimate, Your Majesty. Do you want to die? King Zanmara asked icily. I said, I want a specific date. 20 to 23 days from now, Your Majesty, the advisor stated as his body trembled due to fear. I swear that it will be around that time. No more, no less. King Zanmara snorted. Very well. I will wait for that time. But if your prediction is wrong, I'll have your head. Thank you, Your Majesty, for your grace. The advisor bowed his head repeatedly. But there is something else that I need to report. What is it? King Zanmara asked. We have spotted a large group of lowborns descending from the mountain, the advisor answered. I believe that they are the prophesied force that will prevent us from completing our task. King Zanmara frowned. Did you get a closer look at them? The advisor nodded. Using the grand telescope, we were able to see them properly. What do they look like? It will be best to let you see them for yourself, Your Majesty. The advisor then took out a metallic cube from his pocket, which spread out and expanded until it was 5 meters long. The images of 13 leading the wanderers as they descended the mountain appeared on its surface, similar to that of a television. They look young, King Zanmara commented. They do, Your Majesty, the advisor said. We are supposed to wipe them out using an ant outbreak, but for some reason, they managed to survive the month-long onslaught we have prepared for them. Unfortunately, we had started the summoning ritual a few days later, so I didn't get to monitor their current situation. As you can see, they might have dealt with the Ant Queen and have now come within a few miles of our kingdom. What do you propose we do to them? King Zanmara lightly tapped the armrest of his throne as he gazed at the human teenagers, which they referred to as lowborns because they were far inferior to their race. Despite the fact that he was half human, all the hybrids of the Absolute believed that they were meant to become the masters of men and put them under their leash. There's nothing we can do about them, King Zanmara answered. You already know that we cannot leave the kingdom at this point in time even if we want to. The trade-off is that they cannot enter our kingdom no matter what they do. Only when we complete our summoning ceremony will the barrier of the city disappear. We can deal with them at that time. The advisor nodded because this was indeed the case. They are quite fortunate, the advisor smiled. They can live for a few more weeks. Indeed, King Zanmara replied. Make sure to kill all the men and capture all the women. Lowborn as they are, we still need them to increase the numbers of the Absolute. Yes, Your Majesty. I will return to my duties now. Go, and make sure that the summoning ritual doesn't encounter any mishaps, or your head will roll off from your body. A few minutes later, when he was finally alone in his throne room, King Zanmara glanced at the ceiling where the symbol of the Absolutes was painted. Just a little more, and we can finally reclaim what we have lost, King Zanmara muttered. As long as we succeed, we don't need to worry about those Magian princes and princesses who dared to take our lands for granted. The king once again shifted his gaze to the projection that was in front of him and sneered at the teenagers who were approaching his kingdom. Like moths to a flame, King Zanmara smirked. All of you will be the sacrifices for the new era under my rule. He believed that the moment the wall fell, he and his race would take over the world and make all the other races kneel in front of the Absolute's superiority. This was why their summoning ceremony shouldn't fail. As long as they succeeded, a creature more powerful than the Magian princes and princesses would descend into the world, and it would be loyal only to King Zanmara, who held the throne as one of the Absolutes. The members of the elite team who would investigate the kingdom of Seneros were carefully handpicked by 13. He deliberately picked those who knew of his secret: Erica, Sherry, Diana, and Drazit. Mobility played an important role in this mission, so Rocky's help was indispensable. This alone barred him from considering those who weren't part of his circle. David and the other chosen leaders were tasked to watch over the Wanderers, who were currently staying in the caves Rocky had dug a few miles away from the human kingdom. The barrier in the vicinity was too strong for Tiona's clone to enter, which put a temporary halt to their investigation. Still, the clone had gathered some valuable information. There were at least 8 creatures inside the city with the strength of rank 8 and above. Knowing this, 13 deemed that it would be too dangerous for Rocky to try to break the barrier by force. As soon as 13's team reached the hundreds of meters mark from the edge of the purple barrier, he and his team went out to investigate. I sensed something ominous from this barrier, Drazit said as he gazed at his right hand, which was uncontrollably trembling due to the presence he could feel inside the city. Ratatoska, who decided to check what they were doing, had also joined the team to inspect the kingdom responsible for instigating the Goblin Emperor into stealing their shard of origin. This barrier feels so vile, Ratatoska commented. Just being near it makes me nauseated. Even Erica, Sherry, and Diana were not feeling too comfortable with being near the barrier. They were already dozens of meters away from it, yet even from that distance, they could still feel the overwhelming pressure that the barrier was radiating. 13 picked up a rock and threw it on the barrier to confirm his theory. The moment the stone hit the barrier, the former instantly disintegrated, making everyone's gaze harden. Unfazed with what happened, 13 took out his bow and knocked an adamantine arrow on it. "Everyone, get behind me," 13 said. "This might cause a chain reaction, so it's best to be safe than sorry." His team didn't question his words and obeyed him without a second thought. Once he was sure that everyone was safely behind him, 13 released the arrow and watched it fly straight toward the barrier. Just like the stone, it disintegrated right in front of his very eyes. "Show *T," Erica muttered. Adamantine was one of the strongest metals in the world. For it to be destroyed so easily only meant one thing. Anyone who touched the barrier would also be destroyed. While the humans were still reeling from their discovery, an amused voice reached their ears. "I see that we have some uninvited guests here. It's quite unfortunate, but I can't show any of you my hospitality." 13 raised his head to look at the top of the city walls, where a middle-aged man stood with a faint smile on his face. The others did the same, and almost took a step back when they realized the rank of the person that they were looking at. A monarch, 13 frowned. And not just an ordinary monarch, but a very strong one. 13 had been in contact with a few monarchs during the battle in the Rigel continent. But even the strongest monarch he knew, the leader of the central government, was weaker compared to the man who was looking down at them from the city walls. "Are you the king of this kingdom?" 13 asked. "Yes," King Zanmara replied. "You may call me Zanmara. Are you the leader of the lowborns who came from the other side of the one-way portal in the Randall Stronghold? You're much younger than I expected." "The name is Zion Leventis," 13 declared. "Are you an absolute?" King Zanmara nodded. "Indeed, I'm an absolute." "No, you're not." 13 shook his head. "You're just an absolute hybrid." The king of the kingdom of Seneros narrowed his eyes. None of those who dared to call him a hybrid lived to tell its tale. 13 had taken a good look at the information about the absolute heaven, saved up inside his soul core, and learned a few things from it. Although the information was not complete, it was enough for him to know what kind of arrogant race he was dealing with. "A lowborn like you should know when to shut up," King Zanmara replied. Square root, upsilon, dot. "What if I don't want to shut up?" 13 sneered. "What can you do about it?" "Arrogant lowborn," King Zanmara sneered back. "Are you being brave now because there is a barrier that separates us?" "Yes," 13 answered. "Do you think I'll say something so arrogant in front of a monarch without knowing if they can retaliate or not? I'm not stupid like you." "Such insolence," shouted an old man, who suddenly appeared beside King Zanmara. "How dare you talk to His Majesty so brazenly?" "I dare," 13 replied. "Old dung. What can you do about it?" "Old dung. You bastard." The old man was truly feeling incensed by the teenage boy's taunts. 13 didn't know that his teammates were starting to feel anxious. Unlike him, they didn't know if the monarch had the ability to cross the barrier and attack them. Of course, they were not aware that this was also part of 13's plan to confirm whether those inside the city could pass through the barrier so easily. Depending on the outcome of his experiment, he would be able to form a plan on how to best deal with their current situation. More people appeared on the city walls, with some of them wearing armor. Clearly, they were the guards who were meant to protect the city, and all of them were glaring at the teenage boy as if they wanted to rip him to shreds. "Looks like all of you are just talking," 13 snorted. If you guys have what it takes, then come out here, so I can beat the crap out of all of you. Insolent child, you dare. Courting death. Filthy lowborn doesn't know his place. King Zanmara didn't say anything and simply glared at the teenage boy, whom he could easily kill with a single poke. But since he couldn't destroy the barrier, he could only bottle up his anger. I know that you're summoning something, 13 said, which surprised the king and his ministers. But I'm telling you now that you are bound to fail. Bound to fail? King Zanmara asked. Foolish child, I swear upon my name that as soon as this barrier disperses, I will personally hunt you down to rip out that filthy tongue of yours. Why wait, when you can do it now? 13 made a gesture for the king to come closer. Unless you're feeling scared. The teenage boy had already confirmed that just like they were unable to break past the barrier protecting the city, those inside it could also not leave it so easily. Even a monarch as strong as King Zanmara was unable to do so, which made him understand just how powerful the barrier was. But just as the teenage boy was going to order his subordinates to leave with him, King Zanmara's voice reached him. 3 weeks. After 3 weeks, I will hunt you down like the filthy lowborn that you are. 13 eyed the monarch standing on top of the castle wall before walking away. But after taking 4 steps, he turned around to look at the king and smiled faintly. I'll see you sooner than you think, King of Hybrids, 13 stated. Let's see if you can still be arrogant by then. After saying what he had to say, 13 jumped into the hole that appeared in front of him and vanished from the king's view. Erica, Sherry, Diana, Drazit, and Ratatoska also jumped into the hole without saying a single word, reuniting with the teenage boy inside their mobile fortress. They were all shaken, not expecting that they would be dealing with a monarch. Contrary to his comrades, 13 was still feeling calm. As long as King Zanmara was unable to leave the city, they had nothing to worry about. Also, now that he knew how strong the enemy was, he understood that he needed to find a different approach on how to complete their mission. I'll check the surroundings first, 13 thought. If I don't really see any other option, I will have no choice but to push through with my plan B. For the time being, 13 ordered Rucky to go back to the caves where the other wanderers were staying to inform them about their discovery. At first, he thought that it would be best to not tell them about the monarch. But he changed his way of thinking. Letting them know the truth was better than lying to them. While he might lie about many things, he believed that telling them that they were facing off against a monarch and 7 more creatures that were likely rank 8 and above was the right thing to do. That way, whether they decide to follow him in the future or not, they would know that they were following a person who they could trust. 13 sat on top of a hill, gazing at the kingdom of Ceneros in the distance. But he wasn't looking at the city itself, but the thing behind the city. A mile away from the city was the great wall that isolated the fractured heaven from the rest of the world. It was the old god's last-ditch effort to ensure that the denizens of absolute heaven survived the Jinn invasion. But it also trapped them, preventing them from being part of the bigger world. The old god was the ancestor of the absolutes and was the strongest of them all. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to call him the first absolute, for he was truly unrivaled. Using his superhuman strength and expertise in ancient technology, he created the wall with the help of his people so that the seedlings of their race wouldn't vanish from the world. However, this wall was special. Just as it blocked the Jinn invasion, it also completely cut off the fractured heaven from the rest of Solterra. No flying creatures could fly over this way. No monster could dig under it. And no matter how strong one was, they would be unable to break down the wall. Because of this, the wall had remained in place for hundreds of years, protecting 1/10 of the absolute heaven's territory. But the hybrid absolutes could no longer stop their wish of breaking down the wall that separated them from the outside world. In their point of view, they had become outcasts, and this was something that they couldn't accept. Out of desperation, they formulated many ways on how they might be able to tear down the wall and survive the jinns that were waiting for them on the other side. Although tearing down the wall itself was extremely hard, surviving after it was removed was the real problem that they had to face. Because of this, they decided to conduct a summoning ceremony to call forth a creature that would surpass Magian princes, princesses, and archons. They wanted to summon a colossi, an existence stronger than ones they considered their enemies, an existence that was the counterpart of the Magian King, whom people believe only existed in myths and legends. Some believed that the 7 fiends were Magian kings who had broken through their current rank and became fiends. But whether these rumors were true or not, no one could really confirm because the 7 fiends were beings that no one dared to mess with. As for the existence of Magian kings, deep inside, people believed that they existed, but they refused to accept their existence. If they truly existed, they didn't dare to make their presence known in fear that the 7 fiends and 7 celestials would exterminate them. The only beings who were allowed to roam the world were Magian princes, princesses, and archons. Anyone above that rank would be killed without mercy. This kept the balance of the world, allowing the 7 fiends and 7 celestials to stand above all. I guess that's the only way, 13 muttered. There's no other way. 4 days had passed since 13 and his team had met with King Zanmara. After returning to their base camp and informing everyone of his discovery, 13 ordered the Wanderers to start hunting monsters to gain cores and items, then preserve their meat for emergency food rations. The Wanderers accepted this mission and hunted monsters to gain their cores and farm items. They felt intimidated when they found out that they were about to clash with a monarch and 7 more creatures whose ranks were rank 8 and above. With such an overwhelming disparity in strength, some of them started to despair. Fortunately, Erica and Diana were there to start the Zion propaganda. Since the teenage boy had led the alliance to reclaim the Rigel continent, they used his achievements to encourage everyone to do their best. This worked wonders, and because of this, all the Wanderers started to focus all of their time on hunting monsters to absorb cores and become a little bit stronger. "Is everything all right, boss?" Sherry asked as she approached the teenage boy from behind. "Yes," 13 answered. "Are the preparations going well?" "They are," Sherry replied. "Rocky is busy building underground tunnels and caverns that we can use as shelter." "Good." 13 nodded. "By your estimate, how many days do we need to reach our quota?" Sherry pondered a bit. The young man's question was rather tricky. She was in charge of supervising the amount of food that would be stored. This stock was expected to last the Wanderers and other races 2 weeks. Since their numbers were a little over 900, their daily food consumption was nothing to scoff at. "A week," Sherry stated. "I believe that a week will be enough to reach our target quota." 13 pondered before nodding in understanding. "A week is cutting it too close for comfort, but there's nothing we can do about it," 13 said. "Desperate times call for desperate measures." Their second mission had a time limit of 30 days, and if he were to wait until they were ready to implement his plan, only 12 days would remain before their mission ended. He didn't know if 12 days would be enough for the barrier to be destroyed, so he decided to play it safe and make some adjustments to their plan. 4 days, 13 stated. "Tell everyone that they should hunt as much as they can within 4 days. After that, David and the other apostles will ration the food so that it will last longer." Sherry sighed before sitting beside the teenage boy and gazed at the city in the distance. "What's your plan?" Sherry asked. "I know that you're planning to do something while keeping the Wanderers safe from harm, but what exactly will happen in 4 days?" "You'll know after 4 days," 13 replied. "It will be a surprise." "I don't like the sound of that," Sherry commented. "Your surprises are not for the faint of heart." 13 smiled faintly. He knew that if he told Sherry and the others what he was planning, they might all faint or tie him up to prevent him from doing something crazy. In order to prevent his plan from being delayed, he decided to just keep them all to himself. Truth be told, even he didn't know the consequences of his actions. But since King Zanmara told him that he would personally hunt 13 down after 3 weeks, the teenage boy decided to make him understand that he shouldn't mess with someone whom he shouldn't offend no matter what. 13 had also prepared some insurance just in case things spiraled out of control. But until that time came, he would just watch as the world burned and laugh at the hybrid king who must be thinking that everything was under his control. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Somewhere near the wall of fractured heaven, a young lady with long black hair, tied up with a butterfly hairpin, walked above the wall and gazed across the monster-filled lands in the distance. A sigh then escaped the young lady's lips before shaking her head helplessly. "Soon," the young lady said softly. "I'll see you soon." What are you guys even doing? 13 asked the two guards who were standing at the gates of the city. There's a barrier protecting your city, but the two of you are still guarding it? Isn't that useless? You've come again, lowborn. One of the guards clicked his tongue in frustration after seeing the teenage boy for the third day in a row. I'm just genuinely curious, 13 said as he casually sat on a foldable chair he had brought with him. Why is your king doing something like this? Lowborns like you don't need to understand what our king is trying to achieve, the second guard sneered. But after he's done with the summoning, the one who will die first is you. Wow, scary Tilda, 13 smirked. If your king is so strong, why can't he kill me now? He's just all talk, like you guys. You filthy lowborn, stop talking, the first guard shouted. Hey, I don't want to, 13 replied while arranging some wooden branches to start a fire. Talking to lowly dogs like you is quite fun. Sure *T. One of the guards was really tempted to give the teenage boy a good smacking. But he could only swallow his anger, knowing that touching the barrier even once would obliterate his hand, crippling him for life. The other guard wasn't faring too well either. Every time the teenage boy visited them, he would taunt them repeatedly, making them suffer from high blood pressure. A minute later, a crackling sound reached their ears as the wooden branches started to burn. 13 then took out a few meat skews and started to roast them over the campfire. He even brought a fan to make sure that the smell reached the two guards, making them angrier and hungrier at the same time. Suddenly, the gate opened, and someone whom he didn't expect to see appeared in front of him. Well, hello there, Hybrid King, 13 said with a smile. Fancy meeting you, hey. King Zanmara scoffed as he, too, sat on a chair, brought to him by one of his aides. I just received confirmation that you were the one who ruined my plan in the Goblin lands, King Zanmara said. That's right, 13 replied. The king, who had short blonde hair and golden eyes, frowned. He still couldn't accept that a weakling like 13 managed to defeat the Goblin Emperor in battle. Although it wasn't a one-on-one fight, the fact remained that he won against a rank 8 monster, which should have been very unlikely to happen. The subordinate he had sent to become Lord Zorka's assistant had watched the battle from start to end, and even that man couldn't understand what kind of sorcery the teenage boy used to win. When I saw you, I thought you were simply arrogant, King Zanmara said. But it seems that you have what it takes to back that arrogance of yours. I know, right? 13 smirked. But look at the bright side. You're next in line for a good beating. King Zanmara sneered. I'm not like the stupid goblin that you killed. Well, from where I stand, you look just as ugly as that one, 13 commented. Now that I've taken a good look at you, I suddenly realized that the Goblin Emperor was more handsome than you. Empty talk for someone who will be dying very soon, King Zanmara stated. I'll make sure to torture you until you beg me to kill. One moment. The meat is almost done, 13 interrupted as he turned the skews to make sure that they were cooked evenly. Okay, what were you saying again? You will torture me until I beg you to kill me. King Zanmara nodded. That's right. 13 chuckled before using his thumb to point at something behind me. Do you see that? 13 asked. Yes, King Zanmara replied. That wall will be destroyed by tomorrow, 13 declared. That will be my present to you. The king of Seneros arched an eyebrow, finding the young man's words very funny. Even the djinns on the other side weren't capable of destroying the Great Wall. Of course, he couldn't do it either. In fact, even if the most powerful warriors of the hybrid absolutes, rat men, lizard men, and goblins were to attack the walls at the same time, they would not be able to destroy it. Heck, they would not even be able to put a dent in it. That was how powerful the wall was. After all, it had been imbued with ancient technology that remained active since the wall was built. Empty threat, King Zanmara said. You don't have the ability to do that. You'll find out tomorrow whether I'm bluffing or not. If you can really do it, why wait for tomorrow? Why not do it now? 13 once again flipped the meat skews before answering the king's question. Tomorrow, the moon of Chandriya will have a full moon, 13 replied. I think it will be good to start a festival at that time. Truth be told, I don't really hold any grudge against you guys. At most, you just need to cancel your summoning ceremony, and we can all be friends. Friends? King Zanmara shook his head. I don't want to be friends with filthy lowborns. Mark my words. The moment we are done with our preparations, you and the rest of the world outside of that wall will kneel before the Absolute. 13 shrugged. It seems that the negotiations have failed. You are really hell-bent on the path of destruction. Not destruction, King Zanmara countered. We will just get our rightful place in the world. Inferior species like you guys should be honored that someone capable will rule over you. This time, it was 13 who shook his head. It seems like you've been trapped in this place way too long that you and your people have become arrogant and ignorant, 13 said. The outside world is scarier than you can think. Let's say you succeed in summoning a creature stronger than a Magian prince, which is not only capable of breaking that wall, but also slaying all the monsters on the other side. Even then, you guys will still not be able to rule over the world because there exist beings that stand at the apex of the world. They are the 7 Celestials and the 7 Fiends. They can easily pinch your summoned creature to oblivion if they wish. King Zanmara nodded. What you say is true, but the world is a big place. Even if these 14 beings are just as strong as you say, they can't possibly cover the entire world. Also, I doubt that they will have the time to deal with someone like me, who will use diplomacy to prevent conflicts from happening. 13 took the meat skews off the fire and placed them on top of a chopping board that he had prepared beforehand. I see. So you have everything figured out, 13 commented. I don't know if I should praise you or commend you for looking that far in the future. A king must plan ahead, King Zanmara replied. Since my people believe in me, it is my duty to usher them to greatness. We have suffered long enough, and we will suffer no more. 13 listened to the king as he dipped the meat that he had cooked in the special sauce that he prepared before eating it. He then handed a piece to Tiona, which the black snake ate with gusto. Why don't we have a compromise? 13 asked after he finished eating. Cancel your summoning ceremony, and I will break down that wall for you. Also, I will help you with a monster stampede that will head toward your city. Is this your last attempt to plead for your life? King Zanmara chuckled. While I am surprised that you managed to defeat the Goblin Emperor, I am not interested in your offer. Just wash your neck until our summoning ceremony is over. When the time comes, I'll torture you and cut off your limbs bit by bit while making sure you live through it. That way, you will see with your own eyes as my people trample over low-borns like you on the other side of the wall. 13 sighed because, in his point of view, King Zanmara was simply a frog in the well. The king's delusions of grandeur might become a reality if this event happened without his knowledge. The teenage boy knew that the moment he became serious, King Zanmara's delusions would start crumbling down in the face of reality. He simply ate his food until he finished eating all the meat skewers. Once he was done, he stood up and glanced at the king, who had his arms crossed over his chest. You told me that I am arrogant, and I have what it takes to back that arrogance, 13 said. Tomorrow, I will put your arrogance to the test. Whether you truly manage to lead your people to greater heights or not will be revealed the moment the moon of Chandriya appears in the sky. I'll be waiting then, King Zanmara replied. We'll see if a puny lowborn like you can threaten the king of the Absolute. 13 no longer bothered to talk with the arrogant king, and simply walked away without looking back. Since everything would be settled tomorrow, he would check the preparations done by the Wanderers and see if they have gathered enough food to survive for several days underground. But he only managed to walk a few steps when he noticed a young lady, whose long black hair was tied up by a purple hairpin, standing several meters away from him. Her green eyes, similar to the teenage boy's eyes, looked at the young man as if trying to understand what he was thinking at the moment. 13, on the other hand, stared at the young lady in front of him, who was as beautiful as a painting, and frowned. A glance was enough to make him understand what kind of person was standing in front of him, which made 13 click his tongue. Despite the fact that he was only seeing her for the first time in his life, the teenage boy knew then and there that the young lady in front of him was one of the people whom he hated the most in his life. 13 ran to the camp, where the other wanderers were staying, at a fast pace. He could have reached the area faster if he had jumped onto Blackist's back, but he chose to run instead. The reason? Because he wasn't alone at the moment. After running for half an hour, the teenage boy finally stopped running and looked behind him. How long are you going to follow me? 13 asked calmly. Although he was feeling irritated deep inside, he made sure to not show it on the surface. The young lady, who had long black hair tied up in a ponytail, moved her fingers and wrote something in the air. Don't mind me, and just do what you need to do. Those were the words the young lady had written in the air, which made the teenage boy sigh internally. Since he met her half an hour ago, the young lady had not spoken a single word. She only used hand signs or wrote words in the air to communicate with him. He didn't know her name because she wouldn't answer whenever she was asked. I can't take someone suspicious back with me to our camp, 13 replied. Tell me why you're following me, and who you are. If you don't answer, we will part ways here. The moment 13 saw the black-haired beauty, he felt hate rising up from his chest. Although he knew that feeling hate toward a stranger was illogical, he couldn't stop himself from feeling that way because he understood what kind of existence was standing in front of him. A true hero. Tiger and Roland were also heroes, but they were just that. Heroes. They weren't true heroes. Just like there were third-rate, second-rate, and first-rate villains, there were heroes and true heroes. Fate protects heroes, but she loves true heroes the most. They were the heroes who acted like true heroes, hence why the term, true heroes, was created. Not all heroes were equal. Despite the fact that they were called heroes, some of them do bad things and use their authority, powers, and influence over others to get what they want. It didn't matter if they wanted money or women. As long as they wanted something, they would get it by hook or by crook. Some heroes are even worse than villains, which was the reason why 13 hated them very much. But true heroes were different. They were the righteous heroes who fought for the sake of the weak and the helpless, and they were capable of overcoming all adversities. They were Fate's beloved, and right now, the teenage boy was staring at a person who had killed many of his previous hosts just because that was their fate. Do what you must. That was the reply that the young lady said as he wrote those words in the air. Despite him telling her that they would part ways if he didn't answer him, she simply gave him the same answer, looking as calm as ever. Truth be told, 13 was extremely tempted to end her life to avoid future troubles. But a true hero wasn't someone who could be killed easily. Something would always happen to prevent them from dying until they had completed their role in the world. So, until then, 13 understood that she was an untouchable. He was trying to beat fate in her own game, so he understood the rules as well. This was why he was training Tiger and Roland. When the time came when he needed their help, they would come to his aid and assist him in fighting the pawns that fate had prepared for him. Goodbye, 13 said before taking a step back. The ground behind him opened up, and the young man fell into the darkness. The hole then slowly closed up on itself, leaving no trace behind. When 13 disappeared, a faint smile appeared on the young lady's face as she glanced in the direction where the wanderers were staying. A moment later, a little brown bird landed on her shoulder and started chirping loudly. The bird was none other than a wren, which was a very common bird that could be seen almost everywhere in Solterra. Thank you, the young lady said softly after hearing the little bird's report. She then lightly patted the little bird's head, making the latter close its eyes as if enjoying her touch. Let's go, the young lady said, and the little brown bird flapped its wings to jump down onto the ground. A moment later, it transformed into a giant bird. It slightly lowered itself, allowing the young lady to mount its back. She was also a wanderer just like 13 and even shared the same mission as him. But seeing that the teenage boy didn't like her, she had no choice but to leave him alone for the time being. Zion Leventis, the young lady said softly, may fortune shine upon you. Let's go, Ethan. The giant bird spread its wings and flapped at once, taking flight. Soon, it disappeared above the clouds, leaving no traces behind. Hundreds of meters away, Rocky's head poked out from the ground and opened his mouth. 13, who was on the mouth of the magma Balboa, looked up at the cloud where the giant bird disappeared for half a minute before asking Rocky to drop him off near the camp of the Wanderers. Similar to the young lady, 13 didn't want to have a direct confrontation at the moment since they had more pressing problems waiting for them. When he arrived at the camp, he pushed aside the thoughts of the black-haired young lady that he had met to the back of his head and looked for Erica, Sherry, and Diana. Is everything almost ready? 13 asked. We're almost ready, Erica replied. We even managed to gain more food than we expected. More is always good. 13 nodded. Tell the others that they should continue hunting until tomorrow noon, before we head to the underground tunnels. At the mention of the underground tunnels, Erica, Sherry, and Diana showed conflicted expressions on their faces. Since the three of them were part of 13's inner circle, he had told them what he planned to do, which made the three of them very anxious. But despite their reservations, they trusted Zion's decision. He had never failed them, and they believed that this one would be no different from the other crazy but successful things that he had pulled off in the past. Just how did he find out about these tunnels? David asked Erica as the wagon slowly entered a tunnel that was several meters wide. It's like a giant earthworm has passed this place. Erica couldn't help but giggle because she knew that if Rocky heard that David had called him an earthworm, the magma Balboa might have slapped the apostle with its tail to send him flying. Well, Zion is Zion, Erica replied after she finished laughing. By now, we should just accept whatever he does as something normal. Isn't that way of thinking completely abnormal? You'll get used to it. Erica then walked towards the back of the procession of wagons to make sure that everything was in order. They were headed towards a natural cavern that Rocky had discovered. It had an underground river, which would provide them with water. This was also the reason why 13 didn't ask them to store water, and only used the jars they had for storing the meat jerkies that they had made. Of course, Rocky did a bit of remodeling, so that it would easily accommodate thousands of people. The magma Balboa had created and connected two stadium-sized caverns to the natural cavern he discovered, allowing enough living space for thousands of people. Since they only numbered a little over 900, there was more than enough space for everyone, making them live comfortably underground. 13 had designed natural ventilations so that air would pass through even though they were deep underground, allowing everyone to breathe easily. He had also asked Rocky to create dozens of emergency exits, just in case the Wanderers would need to escape above ground. He even made sure to use glowing ink that lit up in the dark as markers, which allowed the Wanderers to know where they were going. Each wagon possessed a glowing crystal lamp that lit the way because using torches would make the temperature too hot for comfort. After traveling for several hours, they finally arrived at their destination. Wow! Sherry couldn't help but look at the picturesque scene in front of her with wonder. A cavern, filled with glowing crystals that illuminated the surroundings, appeared before their eyes. The light of these crystals were then reflected on the river's surface, making the scene look surreal. Leaders of each squad, you are free to choose which location you want to stay, and remain there with your team members, 13 ordered. There are still a few hours before sunset, so I want everyone to use this time to find their own areas to rest. Don't worry, there are plenty of spaces for everyone. There are even restrooms designed for the use of men and women. Lastly, anyone who will disrupt the peace will be punished accordingly. Do I make myself clear? Yes. The Wanderers replied firmly, which made 13 nod his head in acknowledgement. After giving his orders, he met with the officers that he had handpicked and started a meeting with them. Remember, no matter what happens, you must not allow anyone to go to the surface, 13 said in a solemn tone. Assign guards to every exit and make sure they are trustworthy. Tonight is a very dangerous night, so we must prevent any accidents from happening. I cannot stress how important the next few days will be. So if you guys don't want to have dozens of djinns rampaging through the underground tunnels, make sure that everyone doesn't break any rule. Got it? Erica, Sherry, Diana, Ratatoska, Drazit, David, and a few others nodded in understanding. How about you? David asked. Can you really finish this mission alone? Yes, 13 replied. This is not the first time I face something like this. I already know what to do. After a few more reminders, 13 disbanded the meeting, leaving only Erica and Sherry with him. Are you sure you don't need our help? Erica asked. We can always stay with Rocky if you're worried about our safety. You guys should stay here, 13 replied firmly. Don't worry, I will return safely. I promise. Sherry, who also wished to accompany 13, decided to trust him and agreed to stay behind. They knew that 13 did things for a reason, and since he didn't want them to join him, he must surely have his reasons. A few hours later, the teenage boy left the underground cavern to head to the surface. The sun had almost set, and the first stars had appeared in the sky. "You're finally here." A voice filled with arrogance reached 13's ears, making him glance at the city gates in the distance. The teenage boy was standing right beside the wall, and although it was a mile away from the city, the voice of King Zanmara still reached his ears. "Yes," 13 replied. "Missed me?" "Not at all," King Zanmara smiled. "But I am very curious on how you're going to break that wall, which even I cannot break using my full powers." "You sound confident that I cannot break this wall," 13 commented. "But what will you do once I break it? Wouldn't your city be in danger once that happens?" "My city will not be in danger because you will not be able to break it," King Zanmara declared. "Just because you want to destroy that wall doesn't mean it will happen. Your bluff is entertaining, but no one here believes your words." 13 smirked as he pressed his palm over the wall, while still looking at the city in the distance. Although he couldn't see King Zanmara, he knew that the monarch was staring directly at him from somewhere in the city. "King Zanmara, I'll give you one last chance," 13 said. "Cancel your summoning ceremony, and we can still get along together. Get along with a filthy lowborn." King Zanmara snorted. "I'd rather die than get along with a lowly insect like you." 13 chuckled before glancing at the full moon of Chandriya in the heavens. "I guess you'll be dying then," 13 stated. "In your dreams, lowborn," King Zanmara replied. 13 took a deep breath as he resolved himself to do what he was going to do. He had already prepared many contingency plans just in case something went wrong. So, right now, he could only do what he had set out to do. High above the sky, a giant bird hovered in the air. The young lady's long black hair fluttered in the breeze as she looked down on the young man, who was planning to do something outrageous. Truth be told, she didn't know how Zion would be able to break down the wall behind him, which was imbued by the ancient technology of the Absolute. King Zanmara, who was standing on top of the city walls, looked at the teenage boy with a sneer. From the very start, he never believed that the human boy could break the wall because King Zanmara and his people had already tried to break it many times in the past. He was very confident in his strength, so if he wasn't able to do it, he believed that no one would be able to do it. But, just as he was looking down on the lowborn, whom he had chatted with during the past few days, he saw the corner of the young man's lips rise up into a smirk. A few seconds later, he spoke a single word that was carried to him by the breeze. "Disintegrator." Suddenly, the king of the kingdom of Seneros heard a loud cracking sound that reverberated in the quiet night. A moment later, the wall behind the boy crumbled, and like a domino effect, the walls adjacent to it turned into dust in a heartbeat. The king of Zanmara looked at the place where the wall was standing earlier in disbelief. The entire wall that separated the fractured heaven from the rest of the world was nowhere to be found, and with its disappearance, something took its place. Countless roars filled with surprise, excitement, hunger, and bloodlust reached the king's ears, which made his entire body shudder. Only when he heard 13's words filled with ridicule and contempt did the king of Seneros break out from his daze. "What's wrong?" 13 asked. "Cat got your tongue." After saying those words, the young man chuckled before spreading his arms wide. Right behind him, a dust cloud was headed in the direction of the city, where the purple pillar of light was shining towards the heavens. The ground trembled as countless jinns made a mad dash towards the city, which had caught their attention. 13 chuckled and even waved at King Zanmara goodbye before disappearing from where he stood. "Protect the city," King Zanmara shouted in anger and disbelief. "Guards to your posts." He still needed a few days to complete the summoning ritual, which would allow him to summon a monster who could help them reclaim the lands of the absolute heaven. But now, the only thing that was on his mind was to prevent the ritual from failing, as he gathered his subjects to prepare for the monster stampede that was about to come knocking on their doorstep. King Zanmara had thought that the teenage boy was merely spouting nonsense when he said that he would destroy the wall isolating fractured heaven from the rest of the world. He didn't believe him even for a single moment. How could someone as weak as that young human do something that even he couldn't achieve? So when he saw the wall behind the teenage boy crumbling down into dust, His first reaction was to wonder if he was just dreaming. But the cries of his subjects, as well as the tension in his surroundings, proved that what he was seeing wasn't a dream. The king of Zanmara then gazed at the young man responsible for doing all of this, only to see the smile on Zion's lips. In the end, the teenage boy even waved at him goodbye before disappearing from his view, leaving him and his subjects to face the incoming monster Stampede. He clenched his fist so hard that cracking sounds could be heard from his knuckles. "Everyone, do not panic," King Zanmara shouted. "Go to your positions and prepare for battle. The barrier is strong and will hold for a time. Stay calm." Having been reminded that there was still a barrier protecting them, the panicked people started to regain a bit of their calm. The soldiers all lined up on top of the city walls and prepared their long-range weapons to deal with the monsters who were now headed in their direction. King Zanmara, on the other hand, flew toward the highest tower in the city and glanced at the 6 pillars that were responsible for keeping the barrier active. Each pillar had one rank 8 peak sovereign chained on it. They were artificially made sovereigns, whose sole purpose was to power up the tower where King Zanmara currently stood. Using their life force as fuel, they were being used to summon a king or a colossi, which would allow them to become a force to reckon with. However, it would take them a few more days to complete the summoning ritual. But with the current situation at hand, King Zanmara was afraid that they might not have enough time to complete the summoning ceremony. The barrier might be strong, but repeated attacks on it would bane the life force of the rank 8 sovereigns faster, weakening the output of their life force for the ceremony. That low-born bastard! King Zanmara cursed internally. How dare he ruin my plan? The king of the kingdom of Seneros knew that no matter how much he cursed the teenage boy, their current situation wouldn't change. In the end, the only thing he could do was brace himself for what was about to come. Since half of the blood inside his body came from a full-blooded absolute, he was considered as a superhuman. This made him more powerful than the monarchs of Pangea and Solterra. Self-aware of how strong he was, he had the confidence to face off against rank 9 sovereigns. At least, that was what he believed. Just as he was gathering his courage to face the monsters that were headed in his direction, he felt an overwhelming presence that made his body uncontrollably shudder. Somewhere within the dust cloud, he sensed the presence of a peak rank 9 sovereign, leading the herd of monsters to attack his city. The jinns currently living within the territories of the Absolute Heaven were very different from the jinns that had spread far and wide within Solterra. These jinns were more aggressive, brutal, and merciless because they were pure-blooded jinns. They were the descendants of the first-generation jinns that had arrived in Solterra hundreds of years ago. The young lady, who was riding on the back of the giant bird, looked at the scene on the ground with a calm expression on her face. The giant bird let out a screech, informing her that flying monsters were headed in their direction. "Back off for now, Ethan," the young lady ordered. "We might accidentally ruin his plan if we stay here any longer." The giant bird replied with another screech of acknowledgement before turning around to fly away so that the flying jinns wouldn't pay any attention to it. 13, on the other hand, didn't run far because he was inside Rocky's mobile fortress. The magma Balboa was currently hundreds of meters below the city, observing everything through the eyes of Tiona's clone. "Looks like everything is happening according to your plan." Someone spoke behind 13, which made the teenage boy smile faintly. "For now, at least," 13 replied. "But things can still change." "True. Overconfidence in one's ability will lead to ruin." "Right." The presence behind them then disappeared, and 13 resumed observing the event that was happening above ground. A few minutes later, the monsters' faces finally came into view. Hundreds of elephant-type jinns, all of which were 5 meters tall, charged, making the ground tremble as they approached the city. At the center of them all was a 100-meter-tall rank 9 sovereign ancient mastodon, whose long tusks were over a dozen meters long. Without fearing for their lives, the herd of elephants rammed the barrier, making it shake at the brunt of the impact. The elephants were rank 6 monsters, so most of them suffered serious injuries the moment they came in contact with the shield. However, none of them backed down and continued to ram the shield as if they had gone insane from bloodlust. Soon, this first wave of monsters perished under the barrier's might, burning their bodies as they continued to ram the barrier until they breathed their last. But despite all this, the attacks never stopped, which made King Zanmara grit his teeth in frustration. The rank 9 sovereign didn't continue its charge and simply stared at the barrier, which would fluctuate whenever one of its subordinates sacrificed its life to deal damage to it. Damn you! King Zanmara glared at the rank 9 sovereign, who was looking back at him with ridicule and contempt. It was as if it was enjoying the frustration and helplessness its prey was feeling. Unlike the elephants, it was very intelligent and understood that the barrier wouldn't be going that easily. Still, it understood that the barrier would weaken before his subordinates all died in battle. The flying jinns, who were circling above the city, eyed the people with greedy looks. For them, the absolutes were a very delicious race, for their bloodline was very powerful. This was the reason why many jinns evolved after consuming the denizens of absolute heaven. Only after they evolved did they wander outside of its borders and spread their terror to the rest of the world. Right now, King Zanmara and his people were reliving the horrors that their ancestors had felt hundreds of years ago. Should I just force it? King Zanmara hesitated. His hesitation didn't last long as a determined glint appeared in his eyes. Raising his hand, he increased the speed of the life drain on the sovereigns that were chained on the 6 pillars. He knew that doing this might have some adverse effects on the summoning ritual, but he was left with no other alternative at the moment. The barrier would break down soon because the monsters were hell-bent on destroying it. King Zanmara could already see another dust cloud in the distance, which meant that a second group of jinns was now headed in their direction. The moment that barrier breaks, it will spell doom for him and their people. His ancestors, who were much more powerful and more numerous than the population of his kingdom, had failed to thwart the jinn invasion. Since that was the case, it was impossible for him to resist them with the current forces under his disposal. Knowing that only annihilation awaited him and his people, he decided to go all in, sacrificing even his people for the sake of survival. "Give me your lives," King Zanmara shouted. "For the absolute." All the people inside the city suddenly knelt on the ground, with the weaker ones collapsing and losing consciousness on the spot. King Zanmara didn't plan to kill them, but only took half of their life force to complete the ritual. He even burned a quarter of his own life force to hasten the process. Suddenly, a loud cracking sound reverberated in the surroundings as the first crack on the barrier appeared. However, King Zanmara ignored it and focused his attention on gathering the life force that he had harvested from his people. As more cracks appeared in the barrier, something happened in the sky. A red dimensional gate was forcefully opened, and from it, an 8-headed snake emerged from the sky. At the same moment, 13, as well as all the wanderers who were hiding under the ground, received a notification that made their faces turn grim. Trial of Courage, Part 2. This is the second mission of your chain quest. The King of the Northern Kingdom is planning something sinister. He plans to use every means possible to subjugate all the races in the fractured heaven and make them obedient to him. Your mission is to stop the summoning ceremony that will take place within 30 days. Quest failed. Due to an unexpected event, the summoning ceremony was completed before the time limit ended. Because of this, another mission will be given to you. Mission: Fight or Flight. You can choose between the two options. Clearing any of the two options will automatically clear the current mission of all wanderers within the territories of the fractured and absolute heaven. Our first choice: defeat the 8-headed serpent. Special rewards. For those who are experiencing their first wandering, all of you will automatically become a rookie even if you haven't absorbed any beast cores. This means that you can continue your next mission as rookies, giving you greater strength to clear the last mission. All apostles will also break through the next rank and become elites even if you didn't absorb the required number of cores. Each wanderer will also gain an adamantine-grade weapon and peak adamantine-grade armor that they can use regardless of rank. All wanderers will gain the title Survivor. Triples the speed of your stamina regeneration. If even one person can clear this mission, all wanderers will gain the rewards listed. Second choice: find a way to survive for 30 days. The 8-headed serpent can detect any life force even if they are invisible or hiding underground. It has the ability to burrow into the ground, making hiding from it extremely difficult. If you manage to survive its detection, Consider yourself lucky because you have managed to escape from a Magian King. Special rewards. Each wanderer will gain a peak gold weapon and a peak gold grade armor that they can use regardless of their rank. You will be teleported to a safe location away from the center of the battlefield. Rocky, get away from this place. Now. 13 ordered, prompting the Magma Balboa to flee as fast as it could, heading toward the location where the other wanderers were hiding. Half a minute later, the ground shook as the giant monster fell from the sky and landed at the city, destroying the barrier, as well as half of the city in an instant. King Zanmara laughed out loud as he looked at the monster that appeared in front of him. Yes. King Zanmara raised his fist, feeling overwhelmed from succeeding in summoning a monster that would make his dreams come true. Kill those monsters in the name of the Absolute. The eight-headed serpent glanced in his direction for a few seconds before one of its heads moved to take a closer look at the king of Seneros. Are you the one who summoned me? One of the heads of the eight-headed serpent asked through telepathy. Yes. King Zanmara replied. It is me. I'm the one who summoned you here. I am your master. Good. The serpent head that was looking at the king nodded. You did well, mortal. Now, become part of my strength. Before King Zanmara could even blink, the serpent devoured his entire body, leaving nothing behind. The rank 9 ancient mastodon, who was feeling confident earlier, immediately ran away as soon as it realized just how powerful the eight-headed serpent was. Fortunately, the giant monster, who was over 100 meters tall, didn't seem to be in a hurry to hunt it down. Instead, it relaxedly feasted on the people inside the city, not caring if they were dead or alive. Delicious, the eight-headed serpent thought as it ate one hybrid absolute one after another. The young lady, who was eyeing the serpent from the skies, looked at it with a solemn gaze. She understood that this monster was impossible to defeat even with the current strength of all the wanderers within Fractured Heaven combined. This is bad, the young lady thought. Just like 13, she didn't expect that the situation would escalate to this level. Ethan, let's head farther away, the young lady ordered. Make sure to hide your presence so that it will not detect you. Ethan no longer screeched and quietly obeyed his master's order. 13, who had also arrived at the camp, immediately informed everyone of what happened, making everyone understand the current situation. It's your fault. Elyon shouted. Because of you, the difficulty of the mission has increased drastically. A Magian King, how can we survive fighting against such a monster? Even surviving for 30 days is nearly impossible. The teenage boy had a lot of pent-up anger against 13, and knowing that everything that happened was the teenager's fault, he was unable to hold back his anger and lashed out at him. The other wanderers were also feeling frustrated. Facing a Magian King wasn't something they were prepared to do. Heck, fighting against a rank 8 sovereign was already difficult, much less a monster that was even stronger than a Magian prince. From what they knew, they were the strongest creatures in the world, second only to the fiends and celestials of Solterra. 13 scanned the faces of all the wanderers who were looking at him with conflicted expressions on their faces. Elyon is right, 13 replied. It is my fault that King Zanmara has succeeded in summoning a Magian King earlier than expected. But I think you are all having a very big misunderstanding here. Even if I didn't do anything, he would still succeed in summoning a Magian King because there is no way for any of you to break the barrier that protected the city of Seneros. Simply put, after the time limit ends, the same thing will happen. Regardless of what you say or think, the situation will circle back to this moment. You are free to blame me if you want. I don't care. I have the power to survive this mission on my own. Perhaps some of you can do the same. The only advantage you guys have right now is that we have prepared for something similar to this situation. We gathered enough food that will last us for 2 weeks. And we also have an unlimited supply of water. All of you can decide to stay here underground and wait for a miracle to happen. But as you may already know, the eight-headed serpent can detect life force even if they are buried deep underground. It also has the ability to dig and find you guys here, despite being hundreds of meters under the ground. Right now, the only choice you have is the second option of our mission, and that is to survive for 30 days. 13 crossed his arms over his chest as he once again gazed at the pale faces of the wanderers, who were listening to his words. All of you are lucky because the absolute heaven is a big place. If the eight-headed serpent chose to head north, it would feast on the jinns in that direction. But if it heads south, then all of you might die once it notices your presence. So to those who are confident in running away, go ahead and run as far as you can, as fast as you can. Summon your avatars and leave this place to head south and pray that you will be able to survive for 30 days. But know this, the one-way portal connecting the kingdom of Ceneros and the Goblin domain has been destroyed. The only place you can go is south of the Randall Stronghold. However, the northern side of Fractured Heaven and its southern side are separated by a river that has special properties. No one can swim or fly over it, so remember that if you head in that direction. Make no mistake, this will be a battle of survival. There is no chance to defeat the Magian King. So if you are confident that you can survive alone, just go and leave this place while you still can. After saying those words, 13 made a gesture for Erica, Sherry, and Diana to follow him. Now that the situation had boiled down to this, he needed to make a plan for how they would survive against the Magian King, who was still feasting on the citizens of the kingdom of Ceneros, taking the time to savor the power of their bloodline. I plan to fight that Magian King, 13 said, and I need the three of you to help me do that. Okay, Erica replied in a heartbeat. That's it. 13 looked at the young lady who didn't show any surprise after hearing his declaration. I think I have a general understanding of what you plan to do, Erica said. Although you said you want to fight it, it's more like you plan to lure the Magian King away from this place, right? That way, the other Wanderers will be able to continue hiding and survive this second mission. Sherry, who was just listening from the side, nodded her head in agreement. Although she wouldn't claim that she knew how Zion think, she could tell that he was a very caring person, despite the sharpness of his words. This was why she wished to journey alongside him in this mission, because she had a feeling that as long as she was with him, she would see this mission to its ending. You like doing things on your own and carry the burden on your shoulders, Sherry commented. Just like what happened in the war between the lizard men and the rat men. After finding out the reason why the war happened, you headed to the Goblin Kingdom to steal the Shard of Origin in order to stop the war. I believe you plan to do something similar in this situation. 13 smiled faintly. It seemed that he had underestimated how smart Erica and Sherry were. With that said, Diana, I want you to stay with the Wanderers and lead them while I lure the Magian King away, 13 stated. If both of us disappear, the hierarchy will fall. Also, some of the Wanderers must be upset with me since I'm responsible for the abrupt change in the mission, so they will unlikely want to follow my orders for now. That's where you come in. You need to lead them all to safety. Do you understand? Diana reluctantly nodded in understanding. Okay, I will do as you say. But do you have confidence in luring away that Magian King? I don't know, 13 admitted. But I'll do my best to lead it away from this place. We don't have much time remaining, so I'll be taking my leave with Erica and Sherry. I'll also talk to Drazit briefly and ask him to stay with you guys for your safety. After giving Diana a few more instructions, 13 went to see the Lizardman commander and told him about his plan to lure away the Magian King. Be careful, Drazit said in a solemn tone. As much as I want to help you, I don't have the confidence to face such a monster. I will only pull you down. I'll leave the rest to you. 13 patted the Lizardman's waist before walking toward one of the tunnels, where Rocky was waiting for him. When the three teenagers were safely inside the Magma Balboa's mobile fortress, 13 briefed the two girls on how he wanted them to help with his plan. We are going to head 5 miles to the north and attack the Magian King with a long-range weapon, 13 said. That weapon is an improved version of the ballista that we used to fight against the Magian Prince, Randall the Destroyer. I don't know how effective it will be against the Magian King, but it should be enough to get its attention. Erica and Sherry nodded in understanding. Then, what do we need to do? Erica asked. You will act as the decoy and attack the Magian King from the skies, 13 answered. I don't know if your spells will be able to damage its body, but it will be enough to annoy it. Also, don't use the power of the ring I gave you. It's not enough to deal any damage to the Magian King. Okay, Erica replied. Remember, the goal is to lure it away, not to fight it seriously, 13 stated. It is impossible to defeat it with just us. We will need some reinforcements if we want to deal a decisive blow to it. Reinforcements? Sherry frowned. Where will we get those? Just leave it to me. 13 coughed lightly. I'll think of something. Rocky, who made a D2 to make sure that the Majin King wouldn't detect it, took nearly half an hour to reach their destination. As soon as he found an ideal place, he immediately ejected 13, Erica, and Sherry from his mobile fortress and stood guard behind them. The Magma Balboa had placed them on top of a cliff overlooking the wide plains of the absolute heaven. Even from a distance away, 13 could see the heads of the eight-headed serpent, the sight of which made Erica and Sherry feel anxious. Only 13 had seen the Majin King, and this was their first time seeing the monster. Even from this distance, I can sense its oppressive aura, Erica said solemnly. So this is the power of a Majin King. The two of you should get used to its pressure, 13 stated, because we will be luring it away with just the three of us. The teenage boy then raised his hand and opened his dimensional storage. Metatron had upgraded it and increased its size to that of a football stadium. Since 13 had two-dimensional storage of that size, he was able to bring a lot of heavy equipment that he could use for his missions. When the Grand Ballista appeared in front of the two girls, they couldn't help but feel a little more confident that they might actually injure the Majin King because of how big it was. The entire weapon was made of reinforced steel, and it was covered to the brim with rune magic. I've only 12 ammunition with me, 13 said as he summoned 3 reinforced bolts that were a dozen meters long. Their body was as thick as an electric pole, and each was also imbued with rune magic. Calling it a Grand Ballista was not giving it justice. It was more like a Grand Railgun, which was one of 13's trump cards. Right now, he was able to operate it because his item ban was temporarily removed because there was a full moon in the sky. After saving his sister from becoming a sacrifice as the Moon Princess, he gained the title, Endymion, which granted him several blessings from the royal bloodline of Chandria. Today was one of the few instances that one of the restrictions placed on his body would temporarily be lifted, allowing him to use items that far surpassed his rank. On top of that, the Laplace Demon and the One had given him permission to use equipment that were higher than his current rank as long as he was fighting against monsters that were rank 9 and above. Knowing what his master needed, Rocky summoned the 2 ogres, O1 and O2, to help them master load and operate the ballista. Once the first bolt was loaded, 13 took out a telescope from his dimensional storage and calculated the distance and angle needed to hit the 8-headed serpent, who had almost finished feasting on the people in the city of Ceneros. Since his calculating abilities were further enhanced by the bloodline of Chandria, it didn't take long for him to make the adjustments on the ballista before placing his hand on the lever. One pull, and the bolt would be sent flying at speeds that were 3 to 4 times the speed of sound. 13 wasn't sure if he would be able to deal a serious injury to the monster, but he was confident that the reinforced bolt would be able to pierce through the 8-headed serpent scales. After making sure that his calculations were on point, 13 pulled the lever, creating a spark as the bolt flew toward one of the heads of the 8-headed serpent, who had bitten the head of one of the monsters tied up in the pillar used to summon it to Solterra.